today, as we enter part 2, we're covering chapters 8 through 11, which shares, how to infuse CS into sales, marketing, product, and the importance of CEO ownership. Then next month, we're going to be covering chapters 12 and 13 on how to infuse CS into both services and support. And then in January, we'll be closing out part 2 with how to infuse CS into finance, IT, HR, and one of the most favorite topics that is very hot in customer success, how to avoid customer success silos. Okay, so now let's get into the breakout. So if you actually, let me hide my, hide this, you guys can see my full screen. Okay, so what I'd like you guys to do is I want to standardize how we choose our breakout. So I think Lauren at Gainsight told me that you guys should be able to select your breakout yourself. So here I said type it into the chat, but you guys should have an ability to select your own breakout right now. So can someone speak up and just let me know if they're able to?
Yeah, so I'm about to open all the rooms, and what I've done is I've named them after the person whose name you see in purple, and then it also shows the chapter number and the kind of topic. So I'm going to go ahead and open those rooms. And Dana, just can you confirm, would you like the rooms to be open for 40 minutes?
Yeah, I think that's a good call. And then I do still have a few housekeeping notes, so before we go into them. But yeah, 40 minutes I think is good.
Okay, so when what I think might be best is if you go through the housekeeping and then I'll click the open rooms button. But it should be pretty easy for everyone to go ahead and select them. Okay,
great. Yeah, so put in the chat if you're having a problem, but otherwise just select them. We're making this easier as we go. Okay, so, and then also write your name, company, role, and if you're a cat or dog person. I just personally would like to know. I think it's kind of fun to have a little bit of personal information about us. Second is register and promote next month's bookshop so that we can really share the knowledge with other people in our community. The more collective knowledge we can gain together, the better. And then download and bookmark the takeaway deck from last month. You should have that link. I think I put it absolutely everywhere for you guys to get that. I do have a question though. If somebody could put in the chat, if you guys could put it in the chat, are you guys receiving my email where I send the takeaway email with the links? Are you guys all receiving that?
If you've previously joined one of these bookshops, we would love to know if you've received. Looks like Jill has.
Some people.
Ash has. Depending on if you've attended in the past, you probably received it. If you have attended in the past and you aren't receiving them, send us a chat message, either private message Dana or myself, and we'll make sure to change that going forward.
Great. All right, cool. Next is, as continues to be the case, voting is incredibly close on some of these topics. As a matter of fact, it was a 50-50 split on what topic to discuss around marketing, 50-50. So I allowed moderator, Josh, your moderator for marketing, to kind of choose as the tiebreaker, and he's chosen to try and juggle both topics. So I think you guys will really benefit from that. And he's a great moderator. And I should mention Adam in sales. He and I work together in customer success at GE Digital. He is now the VP of sales at Sight Machine. So he is the perfect person to be moderating the sales chapter. And then Laura, as some of you know, if you've been in her breakout, she is just a bundle of energy. She's VP of customer success at a company that I have just absolutely fallen in love with, Immersion Neuroscience. So I think we've got a lot of really great moderators. And I think that we are very close to where we need to be. So two last things. First, As you might have seen, I have these hashtag Tuesday takeaway posts, and I promote great ideas from all of you book shoppers. I have named you book shoppers on my news feed for our entire customer success community to benefit from. And then Lauren actually reshares those posts, you know, through her own group, and she's really tied into Gainsight. Obviously, she's the director of marketing at Gainsight. So I want to start showcasing one great idea at the beginning of our sessions to help inspire our shares. So this one in particular, don't know if Jeff is on the call, but this was actually one that he gave from last month. And what I love is he covered everything in 30 seconds. So he covered who, customers, and CS specialists. He covered what, successful low touch engagement tactic. He covered where, via phone. He covered when, during onboarding. He covered why, improve onboarding experience for all customers. He covered the how, the tactic, a quick 45-minute phone call with those customers to share the product roadmap, additional features and functions, and then he gave us a bonus. He shared the rest of what the results of those efforts through the customer's sentiment, you know, basically their response. So it's a quick little video. I want to make sure that you guys can hear it. You guys should, so let's play it.
So what we've done is segmented our customers to the lowest level of plan, but at a high seat count. And then our customer success specialists engage with those customers and just touch and say, hey, I just want to let you know about, here's our product roadmap going into 2021. Here's some stuff that we've done recently that maybe you don't know about in regards to the additional feature functions that we have. So that's driven a lot of goodness, if nothing, that we're at least reaching out and engaging. They're very shocked. Wow, I've only ever talked to support. I've been a customer for 5 years, and now you're giving me a proactive call. So that's cool.
All right, good. So I hope that was helpful. So right before we move, move into our groups, I want to take that nice little gallery shot to be able to promote all of you. I know not all of us look great. We haven't all done our hair. Maybe we're at the gym, but if you could turn on your video one time, there's going to be lots of other people. So don't feel shy. It's okay. Maybe wave over your face if that makes you more comfortable. All right, cool. So on the count of 3, I'm going to take a picture of all of us. So 1, 2, 3. Wave. Hi. All right, great. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and break into groups, Lauren.
All right, here we go. I'm going to open the rooms. There you go.
It's like a little circle in the top left, if that helps anyone else.
Oh, that does. Thank you, Cindy.
Okay.
Hi, Ashwar. How are you?
Hi, Dana. Hey, I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good, good. Hi, Brianna.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
I'm so excited to have you on. I've been listening to. You've been you've been on a couple of other bookshops, right?
Yeah.
I joined last month.
Last month. Okay, yeah. So I think you had a really great share, and I was like, oh gosh, I hope I get her on mine. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Dana. Nice to see you.
I know. Good to see you too. Yeah. So I was telling Eshwar, as you know, we're always testing new ways of getting this done. So letting everybody kind of choose their own breakout room, but it kind of is. It's like everyone's kind of trickling in, I think. So
Lauren's doing a roll call.
What's that?
She's doing a roll call. I couldn't find the breakout, so she's just checking. Where do you want to go?
Where do you want to go? Yeah. Oh my God. We always try and make it better, and every time we do, it just ends up being a little crazy. So thank you for rolling with the punches. So we'll probably have more people join as we're chatting, but let's get started. So when we're talking about It Can't Be Delegated, I don't know how many people of you guys actually read the chapter. It was about how, the CEO really needs to own customer success. and and how difficult that really is. They recognize that in the book, and they said, Nick Mehta, how does he go about owning it? Because that's a lot on top of everybody's plate. But since we are really concentrating our efforts in our bookshop on, the people that are getting it done, the leaders and the managers, the executives, the directors, we wanted to actually, we got the votes in, and we want to talk about how to tactically infuse customer success into every department. So let's have that conversation. Before we get started, though, since you guys don't know each other, I know you all, let's just do like a quick, introduction, name, if you want, title, role, company, but, something fun, like, are you a cat or dog person? So, Eshwar, why don't you start?
Yeah, I'll go first. Ashwar Dandapani, Customer Success Manager, Qbol. It's a big data platform. Actually, one interesting thing is I've been in SaaS only for a couple of years before I was in hardware, but technology still. And I'm a cat person. My daughter is trying to change that.
That's great. That's great. And then Brianna, how about you?
Yeah, I'm Brianna. I am a customer and partner success manager for Arcoro. We're an HCM software. My fun fact is this was my first job out of college. I actually started with our support team and moved into an account manager role that turned into a CSM role. And so I've been through quite the gambit here. We went through an acquisition that kind of turned into this. So this has been a really fun learning experience for me. And I love the role. So I just am looking to grow in it and be a customer success manager.
Great. Yeah, well, I'm actually coaching someone who is currently in an account management role, and he's wanting to move into customer success. So I'd be interested, hit me up on LinkedIn after this conversation. I'd be interested to know, when that transition happened. I just like to have a little bit more information. Maybe it would be helpful to the person I'm coaching. That's always a nice little added piece of information. All right, cool. And then Tom, how about you? I know, but
Oh, so Dana and I go way back. So I'm currently looking for a CSM role, but Dana and I worked at Dun & Bradstreet back in the day. And, I was commenting on a call. I remember when the customer success manager title came out, and we were like, what? Who wants this title? It was kind of corny, the success part. And now you're like, oh, it's an institution, but I just enjoy these forums. It's just reinvigorating me where my passion's at, the whole customer success with retention and so on. But so thank you, Dana, for these invites. And I am a dog person.
All right. Yes, I am a dog person too. And I'm transitioning, actually. I've been 6 years in customer success, everything from a manager to a director, pre-revenue to, $2 billion companies, every type of CS type of organization you can think of, and all different types of rollouts. And so I want to take that knowledge, because my purpose in life is to contribute to others. So I actually wrote a book, and I am in the midst of starting my own coaching practice, both for people trying to enter the market, and then also for corporations, startups specifically, that don't even know where to start. So, and then I am a dog person. Chloe is right down there, always at my feet. All right, okay, let's get into it. Let's get into the meat. So, it can't be delegated, right? So, and did I share my screen yet? No. Okay, let me do that. That's important. Okay, cool. So, in the book, they talk about how this can't be delegated. Who owns it? And that's a hot topic, really. Who owns sales? Who owns support? Who owns this? Who's responsible? But, when it comes to customer engagement, everybody needs to own it, and it needs to come from the very top with the CEO. And I've worked for those companies where it's an afterthought. They don't know what customer success is, and so it's not infused. And actually trying to develop great programs is really difficult and challenging for people that are moving from one role into a customer success role who maybe know nothing about it and the CEO isn't bought into it, right? So let's talk about at a high level how you guys have tactically infused, or how you've seen customer success tactically infused into a department or in every department. How has your company used customer success to inform the ideal target customer? What tactics have you taken to drive this? What could help drive this more? So anybody speak up. I want to get some ideas or some challenges that you guys are having in this area so that we can try and come up with solutions. And, you know, floor is yours.
Hey, well, I'll start off. So the company that I really got involved with customer success that Dana and I worked at was Dun & Bradstreet, and long-standing company, large organization, sales-driven organization, still today, but there was a focus on, we were called, I think, solution consultants or application consultants. So it was a form of customer service, but what the company looked at is they were losing dollars on the retention side. And there was talk about, hey, do some quarterly business reviews and so on. And until, you know, Dana, that Palen came into play, I can't think of it, but the organization put a focus on it. And before they just rolled it out, this individual communicated it internally to the higher levels so that they had buy-in. So the US, you know, $2 billion organization, but went to the head of sales for the US and got that buy-in and then rolled it down. And Dana, as you know, there was a whole life cycle, there's a whole format in place, but there's also revenue behind it to say what they showed over time. They were able to identify accounts that were supported by a CSM. I think it was a 2 or 3% retention increase. And the company could measure that and say, so it fit with the C levels and the salespeople to say, oh, this is going to impact, because you have to think how it's going to impact them financially. So that was a little how Dun & Bradstreet rolled it out.
Yeah, and I could add to that too. I mean, it was a real balancing act of, you know, trying to make sure that sales felt like we weren't trying to steal their accounts, but, you know, they want to own them. Customer success trying to find their way when sales was so ingrained and customer success was new. Then there were the account managers, and they handled, you know, lower level accounts, but we shared some of them. And so they had a process that was stellar. Better than any other company I've worked for, but it was really a challenge to try and infuse customer success in the mind of the salespeople, as an example, to try and get them to invite me and introduce me to the account. Like I was sitting there trying to get introduced to the account, and that was a really, really difficult part of the job. Some salespeople were more willing, but it all has to do with the power within the company. Where is the core power? And that makes a difference also. But it was a challenge trying to get customer success infused there. So Eshwar, Brianna, anything
right.
How's
so
it work?
I can go. So one thing, you know, we were using Gainsight for a while, but then they decided to move away from that. But we built some spreadsheet, right? I mean, spreadsheet with the customer kind of 360, a lot of customer information in there. And so the CEO, the board members, all the execs started using that. So a CSM could go have an update on, like, you know, there is a health score. It's actually just simple. You know, is it a red account? Is it a yellow or green? And then comments. What are the next steps? So that kind of got visibility on a weekly basis from the CEO and the board. And there was a board meeting. They used to pull up, like, I mean, like any account, like the top accounts, like, okay, why is this red? And then, you know, the global head of CS then has to have a presentation on what red accounts and then what we are doing, right? So that kind of now the CEO and the board, they're asking the questions and they are ingrained into like, okay, why is the customer red, or why is this, so they see the value of customer success. And actually, in fact, it's coming from like, I think there was a chapter before, it's coming from the investor side, right? Hey, do you have a customer success team? Do you have, because how do you retain accounts? Because that gives me confidence that, my investment is safe, it's going to grow. So that's one of the ways I think customer success got all the way to the top.
Oh, that's great. That's a big deal. Yeah, because if you can get the investment, the investors and the board driving it, then the CEO has to pay attention and infuse it, right? How about you, Brianna? What experiences have you had?
Yeah, so we were 3 organizations that came together, and there were multiple instances of what really the goal was to be a CSM team, but we were implementing it correctly. We were all kind of going in different directions. So as we brought our companies together through our acquisition, we built a CSM team, and my manager came in and he really was the driver for we have to have customer success, and it has to look like this. And that really was my CEO really bought into that and early, which was really great. But we're having the same issue with sales. Specifically, the sales accounts, they want us to be there to be the bearer of bad news, and they want us to be an escalation team. So we've had to put our foot on the brake and say, look, we're not an escalation team. We're a whole lot more than that. And when we want to partner with you and build this account, we can't do that if we're only coming in for the bad news and you want us to stay away the rest of the year. That's a really interesting struggle, but we have the right backing to get there. It's just taken some time.
That actually, I'd like to piggyback on that and ask a question. So do you guys have a support team or, okay,
yeah,
they're usually the escalation, right?
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So the company, I originated with one of the 3 companies, and it used to be the account manager also did support. So as we've grown and built a successful support team, the account managers want us to now come in when the customer isn't happy with support. To us as a higher level of support, which truly is not our job. We can help quarterback there, but
So, hey, Brianna, on that, it's not important, I guess, for a specific example, but you're brought in from a reactive standpoint. Are you in the know of what the situation is, or is it, hey, Brianna, come walk on water and solve this, or?
6 months ago, it was come walk on water. As we're moving from reactive to proactive, we're starting to get a little bit better. But yeah, it used to be, hey, come into this blind and be the savior. And sometimes that worked well, and sometimes there was no winning. And it wasn't a sustainable role.
So I think my experience with that is, even though the issue goes to support for resolution, the CSM is kind of very aware of what's going on. Then because a lot of times support will go to engineering, it's a very technical solution. Then they cannot address it in a timely manner. Then it's an escalation where CSM is involved, and they are escalating to the right channels, getting priority that's needed, because they could say, oh, this will be taken care of at the next release. It'll be another month. No, but the customer cannot wait. And so you have the association of the unique customer perspective to say why it cannot wait, because maybe, they cannot make changes because their own code changes are frozen in a month. So this has to go in now, some reason. So you bring the unique perspective. So of course, we don't want to be a reactive organization. Yeah, there's all kinds of, every company has a different idea of what a CSM does. Yeah, we're not reactive. It's not just escalation. It could be for one customer one time, but overall, we're all, looking ahead, how to improve adoption, how to get the customer the value, maximum value.
I have a question also, if I could just, Brianna, real quick. So Eshwar said that, it was driven by the board so that the CEOs are, on top of it. What about you? So you said it was actually your manager that drove it. What was his position, and how was he able to get the CEO bought in?
Sure. So he came in about 6 months ago to our company, and he's the vice president of customer and partner experience. And so he really took the breakdown between the account managers and support, specifically with these high value accounts. So we own, I can't remember what it is. It's a ridiculous amount of revenue for a very small percentage of customers, which is awesome. It gives us the chance to really have a pointed relationship. He already knew our, he's not the COO, but essentially the COO. He's got a different title, but he already knew him coming in. So he kind of had an in with our exec team and was able to grow that relationship from there to get our CEO bought in. But he came from a customer success background at another company.
Oh, good. And then Tom, I had follow-up questions too, but you were leaning in. What was your question?
Oh, I was curious. This is for both of you. Is it documented, your customer success? Is by either a playbook, is there a life cycle? So if sales came to you, or even a different department, you could produce something and say, here's what we do to onboard customers, and here's what we do to maintain. Okay, I see Brady.
Yeah, so we have a CSM white paper that we provide internally and externally. We have 2 different versions that explains, here's what we, here's why we exist, and here's what our goals are. A lot of that of calm the sales team down and really put them on our level and understand, hey, here's why we exist and what we're here to do. As far as a complete internal life cycle, because we're a new department, it exists, but we're still in the process of documenting it and refining it as we kind of grow as a team.
And then how do you socialize that? Because I've seen that done at a previous customer of mine, which was they created the charter, it was put out in, like a social engagement platform we had, but it was like, no, I determined there was like 8 different customer life cycles and customer journeys throughout the entire organization. So how did you socialize that and get buy-in? Do you know, like, how did you guys go about getting all the other functions playing on the same team?
Yeah, so we're not 100% there yet. We definitely have an issue. It's easy because it's easy with the middle part of the life cycle because we own all of it. So our organization also owns support. So while I don't do support, we're on the same team almost, which helps a lot. Our biggest issue is really getting in line with implementation and building that. So that's been a work in progress and something that's taking a lot of refining over time.
Yeah, and that's your professional services team, right?
Kind of. We have it's split. So we have a professional services team and an implementation team. They're not the same thing, but they work really closely together, which is interesting. And I haven't worked for other tech companies, so it was all I knew when and we're starting to learn how different that is from some companies.
Yeah. So, so one of the things that let's talk about this challenge. Let's see if we could come up with some ideas. So you're having a hard time getting implementation kind of on board with, the customer success charter. It's coming from someone, from your boss, not up at the CEO level necessarily. So, what do you think, Eshwar, it looks like your video went away. There we go. But Tom, Eshwar, Tom, we worked at DMB, and then Eshwar, it sounds like you guys had it coming from the very top. So how can we help Brianna, try and get, the implementation team more aligned with customer success? Any ideas?
Well, I think just initially my thought is, so back in a prior career at DMB, I did do implementations. I guess the question would be how successful, meaning when you do those, if I set a project plan, we had times, you'd make a commitment to say, here is our goal from a production standpoint. I guess, are you seeing lags in that implementation side? Or are you seeing, they all have some issues, but that's where my thought is, if you have a customer success person associated with that implementation, that person can help transition it from, the implementation to a production environment, smooth transition. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it also depends on the org structure, right? The other one is there a VP role person who understands customer success, like VP of customer success, where support, customer success, and probably implementation PS, they all come in, because then new logo comes in, it's the implementation, takes care of the onboarding. And then a customer success manager is also introduced very early in the customer journey, right? So I think that's where I would go. Otherwise, you kind of get to sales first to understand, make them understand why you're there and what role you play, because they are the closest to the customer, and that's where a lot of battle is internally.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So, it sounds like, Brianna, your boss has kind of a lot of power. So, maybe he can do those inroads with the implementation team. Is that something that's viable? Like, what challenges might be there? Is that something that you can try?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. Interesting. We don't come in all that early in implementation. In fact, there's this kind of feeling, why are you here? They're still in implementation. So
yeah. There is a curtain. There is a curtain, and I have found they do not like anyone involved at all. And I pushed at my previous companies. I was like, if I don't know what their challenges are in implementation, or how they're integrated with certain things, or why they've chosen to do this, or that they even bought this function, and how you made that happen, and who the people are you're talking to, how am I supposed to help them going forward? So I pushed for that, but there is this kind of like veiled curtain.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Those are all the friction points, right? Because the account executive who sold it and the solution engineer who sold it, they keep the account like very close to them. Like, they don't want to give it away to another CSM in the mix early. So that's a problem everywhere. And actually the way our company fixed it, which was kind of a little bit expensive, is at least they said the account executive will own it only for the first year. After the renewal, it goes to a expand team, which would have expand account executive. It's a little bit more expensive.
Have that.
Okay.
Our sales team will sell it, but once they are sold and through implementation, they go to the account management team. So we have two different teams, one that's selling and one that's renewing and
perfect. Okay.
Okay. Let me ask you this. So if this would happen at prior company, if you went to someone at one of your customers and they said, who's my point of contact? Who's my person? Because Dana, sometimes at Dun & Bradstreet, we would list 8 people and it would confuse. And we finally said, you know what, give them, and we were promoting this, look at all the resources we're giving you. So we look as a positive, but customers would go, I'm confused on who to call. Yeah. So we narrowed it down and we really tried to emphasize and separate it. Hey, if it's contractual, we'll have to get to your sales rep, but ideally it was that customer success person how it was supposed to work. So curious in your organizations, is that the case, or is there some confusion or blurry lines with that?
There definitely can be for us. There's often so when do I call you, or why don't I call you every time? So we have kind of done that. Look, if it's contractual, so we broken it into 3, if it's technical, contractual, or kind of anything in between. But I always tell my customers, look, if I'm not the person, I know how to get you to where you need to go. So worst comes to worst, give me a call. And I kind of see that as a way to continue to build a relationship with them and prove to them that I can be held accountable. So yeah. You reached out to me to this, and I'm going to get you to resolution, even if it wasn't my job. I got you where you needed to go, and they can trust me.
Yeah.
What about, how do you guys feel about the customers? So once you have them, I do have to say, I will admit it, and my background is sales, I want to own that customer. And we have to all get away from that, but I like to own my customer. I like to have the relationship with them. I like feeling needed and wanted. I like to be able to have the power of the customer. If someone needs to talk to them, they don't have the relationship. Well, I have the relationship. let me help you, but let's do it in a way that makes sense. You know, and I think that's a problem with every function. I don't think it's just me, but I mean, do you guys have that a little bit where it's like maybe there's someone in sales, or maybe someone in implementation, or maybe someone in product, or maybe an account manager that has a better relationship and they're not wanting to let go? Or are you a person like me where it's difficult to let go? And how have you guys dealt with that?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, right. So it really depends on how they view this as a team, right? We call in Keyboard triad, but it could be just because there is a account executive, there's a CSM, and then there is a solution architect, because the product is very complex. But for example, most products are not that complex. At least it's an account executive and a CSM. I think they had to work together. So as a team, right? So I would say the best teams are, if you pull up suddenly one person, anybody, and say, hey, what's the latest on this customer? What's the customer health? Tell me. They should have the same answer. When it's not the case, it's bad. So I have one customer account executive who kind of try to keep the relationship, just try to do everything on his own. Even the education session, training session, he kept me in the dark. Like, when did that session happen? He just brought me into the loop when there was a problem. I said, what is going on, right? You just have to keep me in the loop. I know you're trying to build the relationship, but it kind of like had an email thread going with the leader there, and then like I was not in the loop. Everything going on. So I actually had a one-on-one with him, saying, well, this is not going to work the way it is. Either you say you don't want me as a CSM, you can have somebody else assigned, or you work with me. And then he said, okay, sorry. His background was being an account manager, where he did not have a CSM before. So he was not used to that. That was his background. So he had this email thread all the time with the same person going on forever, didn't bring anybody else in. So it changed right after our conversation. It was a very difficult conversation. So the meetings are a lot more productive. Yeah, so otherwise they're more tactical, right? More transactional. Customer wants this, I got this. But the CSM as a CSM, I'm like strategic. Okay, where does this align with the overall customer journey, our product roadmap, their growth? Like, we have a trusted advisor hat, so we have a different viewpoint. Keep me in the loop. Just bounce it off. So we co-create the strategy anyway. So that's.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually that brings up a good point that, it seems like what ends up happening is, because the CEO isn't owning it, that what ends up happening is we all down at the bottom, when we're trying to create relationships and cross-functional collaboration, it can be challenging. And so we have to be the ones to have those difficult conversations with that salesperson, that account manager, that support person. Hey, how can we work together? So I'll give an example. When I was working at one of my previous companies, there was a new salesperson that came on, and I will admit, the customer seemed to like men in general, and this had been, known for years. And so I didn't feel like he had the respect for me. I had a lot of experience, obviously, so it was a real hit to my ego. But when we got all of a sudden a new salesperson handling the account, then all of a sudden that customer started calling that salesperson. I'm like, first of all, I know everything about your account. I have created like programs just for you to include in our product roadmap. I've done this and that in my head. And I'm like, this guy just started and you're going to him, asking him to get stuff done for you. So, what I did tactically, is I talked to my manager. This is when I was a senior CSM. She was a director. I said, listen, you want me to come to you when I'm having problems with inroads and relationships. I am having a problem with this salesperson. He's new. He is like running with it. He is acting like it's his customer, and I'm like, gosh, I put all this work and effort for a year and he's just coming in like he did everything. I'm like, how do I handle that? And so we had talked about it, and I can't remember if she went to his manager or not, or if she went directly to him, or if she advised me. But what I do remember is that I finally was like, I just need to have a conversation with him. And so I reached out. I said, hey, you know, Mr. Salesperson, you know, I know you've been doing great stuff with X company. You've been reaching out to this customer. Can we have a conversation? Because I've been doing some stuff on the account. I'd like to get you up to speed on what's happened so far. And, you know, you can get me up to speed on what you've been doing. And then let's try and, if possible, let's try and find a way to work together so that, you know, we are taking care of the customer on both sides. And what was great is that when I did have that conversation, so he agreed to the meeting, we had the phone call, I was stressed. I was like, how do I say this right? And you know, and so I basically laid that out to him, and I said, I want to work with you. You know, we need help on this account. It's a huge account. So any help I want, you know, but I said, I really want to make sure that I'm involved in the process, because this thing needs to be delivered, this thing needs to be delivered, this thing needs to be delivered, and I'm responsible for those. And I know you're responsible for your number, making the sale, upselling. So how can I help you, you know, increase the sales, and how can you help me do this? And I think by putting it that way tactically, we found some synergy, and we really worked together very well after that. And I was breathing a sigh of relief. I mean, that's a good story. It doesn't always go that way, but that's one tactic that happened to work. Do you guys have any yourself? Maybe not sales, but well, you know, another department.
But Dana, I will say, like, scenarios like that, what you'd run into is maybe you're going into the renewal where, same thing, Ash, where someone's doing something on the side and it's like, no, I got it, and we're doing this, that. But then you get to that renewal call or an executive business review, and the customer sees your disconnect, because you can't go into a call and all of a sudden say, you know, hey, we're partnering. They see the holes, and it is always interesting having, after like a business review or something, like, talk to your contact and go, hey, give me some feedback. And you'll be interested to see what the observations are.
Yep.
So besides that one, and Dana, I agree, the whole internal stuff, that's a whole communication side too, but.
Yeah, it'd be great if we could just have the CEO be like, create the charters, create the, you know, the roles and responsibilities, make sure everybody is playing nice, manage it down the line so that we're not, you know, as customer success managers trying to make it happen with people individually as you're working with them. Have you guys experienced that? Like, what would be an example of something like that maybe we could take away as a solution or a challenge, and we can try and solve it?
No, what's the question again? I mean, like,
sure. So, and it kind of actually goes to this bullet here on, you know, what additional tactics like those described in the book, right? Like product-based, marketing, sales, service, onboarding, upselling, has your organization taken to drive customer success? What has been successful or not? So that was like one tactic where we couldn't get it from the top down. We just had to do it ourselves internally. So whether you guys have it from the top down, something that's tactically worked, or where you've had to work one-to-one that's been a success, or as a challenge that we can, you know, maybe solve together.
I think, well, so we're a pretty small team, but I think that we take a lot of time as a team to work out issues. So even though it might not be coming from the top, we've been empowered to kind of make our own decisions and get the resources we need. And we start together as a team and kind of work out from there. So we're never on an island or by ourselves making decisions when we don't feel that we have the ability to. It's not that we don't make our own decisions, but we're able to come together and kind of roundtable it and say, okay, here's where I am. How would you do this? And put together each other's tactics to build a really successful team and a successful way of handling success with customers.
Yeah. So when you say, you know, you start as a team, when you say that, who are you talking about? Are you talking about a team that encompasses all the different functions together? Or are you talking about something
The
else?
customer success team. So there's 3 of us in our manager, so we're tiny, but it is really good because we've built a really good working relationship, and we're able to kind of play off each other's strengths and use each other's strengths in our own conversations or decisions with customers.
Got it. So then you, as a team of CSMs, come together and you'll share, I'm having a challenge with product because my customer needs something put on the roadmap, or they're having a challenge with the usability of this thing. And then you guys kind of brainstorm together solutions on how to solve that.
Brainstorm solutions, or sometimes it's just, hey, we need this resource, and we figure out the best way to get a resource involved. Even if it's not a end game solution, it's, hey, we know what we need in the interim to get there.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's cool. That definitely works. And that was the, because there was someone you guys were talking about, Eshwar, where he was talking about the stoplight reports, which I think is a really great tactic, is having every function together, the leaders from each of those functions going over those stoplight reports, but having at least one, if not all, of the teams handling that particular account in there. I think that's also really important. But, do you do that, Brianna, with your team, the stoplight, to maybe use that as a way to get other teams on board with you? Like, hey, this is their yellow. Can we work together to make this happen?
Yeah, we definitely use that. And we have additional priority factors that we count into that and have ways to pull in other teams when needed, for sure.
Oh, great. All right, well, look, oh man, gosh, time actually really flew. Okay, so we've got 20 seconds left. So any last thoughts, any great idea that you guys want to be able to share, or something that you got that you thought was awesome in 10 seconds?
I enjoyed this.
This is great.
It's very good. And yeah.
Good. All right, let's pop back in.
All right, is that showing up now?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, we'll just go this way. Great. So, and we'll see if other people pop in, but what we did basically is go through the chapters and give people options to choose which of 2 topics. And what people elected for this particular topic is basically aligning customer success and product on a joint path. So since it's us right now, I'd love to know, Jill, what's your, what's your company, what's your role right now? And then we can jump in and chat about our strategies.
Yeah. So I am Senior Director of Customer Success at Seismic Software, based in San Diego. So this is definitely something that I'm interested in talking about and hearing how others are doing this and doing it well. We've experienced a lot of growth in my almost 4 years at Seismic, and I think when we were smaller, aligning CS and product was easier because we were all in the same physical space and we had small teams and we all knew each other. And as we've grown, I'm definitely seeing a larger disconnect. And so I'd love to hear, how others are experiencing that and how they're aligning these 2 orgs.
Great, I love it. And I see we've had some additional people join. Hi, Ash, Gretchen,
Oh,
Ellen,
good.
Hi, Laura.
We were briefly just introing ourselves, what our company is, or briefly what we do, so that we all kind of know where our different ideas are coming from. So Ash, if you want to give a very quick intro, and then we can jump in.
Sure. I'm the head of customer success at Hiero AI. We're a early stage natural language generation startup. We're working a lot with a portfolio of clients in healthcare, real estate, as well as even the public sector. But this is really a relevant topic for me because being a seed stage startup, we've only raised $6 million. A lot of our customer sync calls, we have multiple even product managers attend because the product roadmap is so agile. Every week or 2 we're releasing a new feature. This is a very relevant topic for me. So excited to hear more.
Great, exciting. How about you, Alan?
Yeah, hi, my name is Alan Schaefer. I've been a customer success enthusiast since about 2015. I've developed and scaled 2 CS departments and actually currently looking for a leadership opportunity in customer experience or customer success field. And this chapter I feel deeply passionate about because it really the success of your customers and your organization rely heavily on the tight bond and successful relationship between product, customer success. And so I thought it'd be a really good one to attend for today.
Great. I'm excited about it too. How about you, Gretchen?
Hey everyone, so kind of the opposite of Ash, I work at Cisco, so very established, huge company, and the challenge for us is working with technical debt because a lot of the, so I'm in the security CX product management group, so I'm supposed to be doing CX strategy for our security portfolio of 14 products, almost all of which were acquisitions that are at various stages of independence or being acclimated into Cisco. So really interested to see how we can apply some of these things in that sort of messy environment.
That's great. I'm so excited. Yeah, I startup also right now, Immersion Neuro. We are about 2.5 years old, but just getting ready to scale. So this is also a super passionate chapter for me. So I'm super excited. So the general approach here, we'll just kind of start with the questions. I'm totally fine with us pivoting to different spaces, but the idea is just to get, ideas that we've all tried or heard of, what's tried and true, what hasn't worked as well, and then hopefully take those home with us. So the first question here is, obviously we know from the chapter, it's really important, and as we all just noted, to align both customer success and product on a joint path. So from your experience, and whoever has ideas and wants to share, what have you done or what have you thought about doing to really more closely align the customer success and the product team? Like, what strategies have you tried that are working or have been successful so far? Anyone who has ideas to share?
I'll quickly go first. I think, I don't remember what page it's on, but I think it's ensuring that both team members are looking at similar metrics, right? And kind of are on the same page of, what are some of the areas and goals of the organization, and what's the goal of product and customer success, and how are we going to meet those together? Right. With that same type of notion is understanding your customer base, right? Understanding, who are your healthy customers, who are your high value customers, where are we going to be pointing references, and how are we going to collaborate, make sure that we're on the same page between both parties. And so I had a very tight-knit relationship with a lot of our product folks because of that, and had different tools and techniques that we can get into that kind of helped highlight where we could focus these resources, because one of the organizations I was in was also in technical debt, right? And so how do we balance innovation and then also some of our current long list of features or bugs?
That's great. I'm looking forward to hearing strategies that you've used to get on the same page. I know that sometimes that can be difficult.
Yeah.
What about you, Ash? Have you had any, being at a startup right now, and I know, Jill, you said that you're kind of in the process of expanding too. Ash, have you experienced any particular things that have worked, things that have been struggles? How do you get both aligned?
Yeah, so in terms of, the 5 principles, mentioned in the product section of chapter 8, I found ends not means is one of the most important principles for us, because the product I'm working with, we're entirely vertical agnostic. So we're using the same natural language and understanding technology, but for, healthcare use cases or real estate or even local government. So being able to bridge that feedback loop with the product team by having them attend the mutual success plan and kickoff meetings, having them attend not only just the QBRs, but even these incremental touch points to really have more of a human-centered design approach, like understanding not only what the customer is saying, but taking insights on customer analytics, what are the end users saying as well within our product. So I think, ends not means, bridging that feedback loop, but then helping the product team really take a human-centered design approach. That's super important for an early stage startup, I find.
Absolutely. What about Gretchen? How do you feel? I mean, I'm sure it's very different. It's just
It's very different. Yeah. I mean, for us, this might be really basic level for those that have been able to work with a product built from the ground up, probably with customer success in mind, but like our products weren't. So it can be as basic as making sure we have the telemetry in the products to actually, like it says here, e.g. aligning on success tracking. Like you need to know who's logging in, what features are they using, like different adoption telemetry from the products. We can't really do our job without them baking that in. And so working to get prioritized on the roadmap of the product. and then deciding what success looks like. So once we have the data flowing out, what do we want to target, and like how do we look at all the telemetry from the product that we have, and then determine which features really dictate true adoption and which features are going to drive like loyalty and stickiness versus others that maybe someone's using it a lot, but if a competitor calls, they'll leave tomorrow. So like aligning on what success looks like by doing if-then experiments is really important. And then once we know what success looks like, how do we drive toward that outcome? So we're working on like email journeys that have very specific actions that we're trying to drive, or success stories that we're trying to highlight, or ROI we're trying to highlight. So yeah, just some thoughts.
Love that. What about you, Jill? What kind of struggles? I know you mentioned that it's been a process as you've grown.
Yeah. So we're at Seismic. We're late stage startup, pre-IPO. So our total team grew to about 1,000 just this week. We topped the 1,000 employee headcount mark. But when I joined the organization, we were just over 200. So we used to sit within a stone's throw from our product team, we in CS. And so it was really easy to walk right over to a product manager's desk and say, hey, my customer's asking about this, and can you get on a call? And we don't have that anymore. A global pandemic aside, even before we all started working from home, we just, we moved to a larger space, and product was on a different floor, and now they're all over the country. And so it's been, it's a personal adjustment for me, and not having those personal connections to the product team that I was able to draw on to support my clients. But as an organization, I think we're still trying to figure out programs and processes to more tightly align CS and product. And again, we're growing, and I feel a little out of the loop, right? So I used to be very much in the room in those conversations, and now it's sort of top down, telling us how it's going to be, what our voice of the customer program looks like, and I feel like there's a disconnect, and so I'm excited to be part of today's conversation and hear how others are achieving that, or bridging that gap and bridging that disconnect. And Laura, I don't know if you noticed, but we do have 3 other folks in the room who haven't had a chance to introduce themselves.
Oh, thank you.
So
no, I didn't notice that. Hello. Thank you so much. Hi. Sorry, all. I got my thing on the wrong view. Hi, Cynthia, Fred, and Talia. Welcome. Thanks so much for that, Jill. We did some quick intros. Do you all want to give very quick intros, and then we'll go back to that?
Sure. I'll start. My name is Fred Loescher. I'm a former technology person. I used to work in tech consulting, software development, left that industry to start a business not related to tech, but I'm looking to pivot back in. And I'm, based on a lot of research and people I've talked to, customer success aligns well with my skill set. So I'm here, to learn, just be part of the community, hopefully provide some input as well.
Great, welcome.
My name is Cynthia. I am the head of CS for Silversheet, so in the healthcare space, SaaS and the operational side. And I just found out about this group, so I haven't read the stuff that y'all have read, but excited to chat. And yeah, I've been in healthcare before. I was in SaaS and technology, so about like 14, 15 years.
Great, welcome. And you're certainly welcome, even without reading, to share any ideas that you have. Talia, did you want a quick intro?
Sure. Hi, Talia here. So I've been in the world of like digital media for about 15 years now, and then been in really like CS probably for 5. I used to do both sides of it. And then now I'm the head of customer success at Zyper. So they're kind of like a marketing community building platform, a SaaS tool. We're moving really into making ourselves a platform and not like an agency based. So we're a very, very lean team. So I think I'll just lead it with the challenges that we're having is, I came from a company where there was a lot of alignment between product and CS. And in this new company, there isn't, just because we're so lean and we're building the product. And I feel like there's a training gap. So I will lean on anyone for any advice on, how to get the product team to actually train the CS team, since they are the ones that really need to be the product experts with customers as they're still crafting and building and lean themselves. So that's a challenge I'm facing right now.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I mean, especially, I know Jill's got to hop at 12:30. Has anyone had experience in trying to either, from Jill's perspective or Talia's, bridge the training gap or bridge that kind of the transition between going from really having easy access to broader access? Anyone have experience with that?
Yeah, totally. And it was helpful for me. I was in a similar situation, joining, essentially, building out the customer success function in my company. And one thing was giving product ownership of building the documentation and the training materials for example, our CSM team. They have to run more technical reports, like using, Python or whatnot, but building out that documentation. And we clearly had a meeting. I let them know, this is your responsibility, because you're sort of bridging that loop between product and CS to build out that content or knowledge base, right? So whether you're using Notion or...
Yeah.
It's a great idea. Has anyone else had experience on trying to kind of open up the conversation pipelines, I guess, or make that simpler?
Yeah, I think like from my experience, that was always like a healthy tension, like who does it, right? And when do they do it? And so I think for us, where we net it out, and it's a conversation we constantly come back to sometimes, depending on what we're building, is like they can build something, but the CS team might have the perspective that needs to be added to that content that really can speak to like what's going to stand out for your client, or what's the most important part of a big release or a feature that may need to be highlighted over other things. But ultimately, we decided to have the product team own it, but our team and our CSMs, because we were so close to the product, we actually UAT'd a lot of things. And so it wasn't their job to train us so much as like we were a part of the process. And then we really helped put the spin on how we were messaging it. And we were very involved in the release plans and the release structure. Mm-hmm. One comment I'll make about how to make it somewhat scalable. So even though I wasn't at an organization as big as Jill's, I think like scalability is something that we just ran into issues because we were parallel pathing enterprise and all these other things at the same time. And so I really had to empower my CSM, especially like my senior folks and people who are more technical, to have their own meetings with PMs versus like my meetings with the head of product, so that our meetings were more about greenlighting and prioritizing at the most important levels. But the more experienced CSMs and the like team leads of the PM teams were the ones who were diving into some of the numbers and the details and those kinds of things. And it took us a while to get there, also using things like RoadMonk and trying to get really organized around like high visibility versus diving into the details were some of the ways that we tried to attack it.
Yes. What are there other challenges or things that you guys have noticed that have worked really, really well to kind of bridge certain activities? I loved in the book how, there are some examples that are listed on the slide that I'm sharing here, but, identifying the tips and tricks, looking for themes around a problem, right? As people who are typically working really closely with the customer, we may recognize problems or have our own things that we're using as Band-Aids in the process to make things work really well. And it's beautiful when you can actually, when you have access and can share those learnings. Any stories or experiences or things that you've tried and applied that have worked great, or maybe even not so well?
I will say one thing before I have to drop. I always encourage the CSMs on my team to pull product into conversations with clients. I think it's so important that our product managers are on the line, hearing live from clients the way that clients are thinking about our product and the way that that they would like it to evolve. So even as we've grown, I've kept encouraging the team to put those meetings on the product team's calendar, and the product team, they might get a little hesitant to join because they're just not quite sure what the client's going to expect from them. But I think everybody learns a lot, and clients love it too. So that's one thing that has worked very well for me.
I love it. Thanks for sharing. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Have a great rest of your session.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's, it's interesting at different, and I'm curious to know also, I know Gretchen, you said obviously at Cisco, I don't know if that's something that you all are able to do as well. We, as a startup that, the startup I'm at, we actually have one head of product. He just joined the team, and it's great because he's super enthusiastic about being part of those customer calls. Have you ever experienced scenarios, if anyone here, where product is more hesitant and doesn't know what they're getting into? And if so, have you overcome it? Or have they usually been gung-ho and ready to go?
I think the difficulty for my team is being able to prioritize customer-specific feature requests versus broader feature requests. And sometimes we have a customer-specific request that's like kind of mission critical. Like this is preventing renewal, this is preventing upsell, and just communicating as in a business context how important that request is, even though it's customer specific, even though you can't use it for the whole portfolio of clients, right? So that's like a challenge I have, like communicating how severe or how mission critical the new feature request is.
Anyone else experience that or have solutions that you've utilized to?
Yeah, when I've come across that in general, right? Kind of, there's a million different enhancement requests out there or bugs or whatever it might be. How do you get the priority or how to focus on, the certain customers, and how do you know where you want to invest your resources, right? And one thing that I work closely with our VP of product on is basically a customer segmentation matrix. It was pretty manual, but what it did is it basically outlined, the health score on one axis, which was part of, net promoter score, ideal customer profile, other metrics that would kind of allow the organization to understand how healthy or ideal this customer might be. And then we had MRR on another axis, right? And then we had just different buckets or different plots that said, is this a customer that we want to really focus on and really dominate? Do we need to upsell this customer? Is this customer at risk, or maybe proactive churn, if you will, right? I think customers that might be in the lower right-hand quadrant that are at risk, but have a lot of potential, right? And so that at least was a little bit of guidance to ensure that the teams were on the same page. And then you could make those decisions or those educated decisions once there was that data set essentially that everyone was looking at. And so I'd meet with the product team usually on a quarterly basis and review that, right? My CSM teams and the leadership would create this, and then we would talk about it as a group.
I love that idea. Go ahead.
This might be related to what Alan's saying, but there's also the possibility of maybe create a use case around that new feature request, and maybe have your CSMs work with like your top 2 or 3 clients and see if that's a feature that they would get value out of, and then maybe that would help with prioritization, but also knowing that's going to help the future of, upsells or renewals, because, we weren't expecting that, but we would definitely find value in that. I'm just kind of thinking at a high level, but kind of grabbing maybe your top 2 or 3 clients if there's, time allotted for CSMs to do that.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I love that. I think those are both great. I think it's great to have this. And so I love the idea of the quadrant. I actually jotted it down, right? Because that's a first step sometimes it's hard to assess how to prioritize, right?
Yeah.
And then Fred, that's also a great idea. It's okay, then let's see, because sometimes people don't even know what they don't know, what they're missing, right? That's great.
The only thing I would add is, like, at least for me and the types of personalities that run the different heads of our team, right? Like, I think the like very objective stuff that like Alan's talking about is like definitely dead on, and like how those things tie into like your quarterly goals or your annual goals, so that it doesn't feel like you as CS are just trying to push an agenda, but you're really trying to move forward and push forward what the organization's agenda and goals are. And then something that I really had to adapt to is just like, also, what does that leader care about? And like, how do you talk about it in the language that that leader cares about, right? Like our former head of product, like just wanted to feel like they were creating, that they were just disrupting the space, even if that's not what the space wanted to happen. And so I would try to frame the way that I was trying to communicate in a way that really spoke to that person's motivation. And I did the same thing with the same thing to the sales team or to the engineering team, because I think it showed them that like I appreciated what they wanted to accomplish, even though our goals were the same, but like from that perspective. And so like in CS, like we're all about having to manage these relationships and people and personalities, whether they be our external clients or our internal stakeholders. And so, you know, when we had a different product person come in, then, you know, we had to kind of like readapt and adjust. But that's really helped, like just even in my relationship with those teams. Because I feel like in my role, I've just had a healthy amount of tension with each department, and it's just necessary, right? And so that's been helpful for me.
I love it. My background is in psychology, so you're very much psychologizing your interaction with folks. You know, it's the very first session that I moderated, Ty Raya was in the crew. I don't know if any of you know Ty, but he mentioned, I'm trying to remember the topic, but it was very much also kind of aligning, not product and CS, but I think it was like aligning generally teams, right? And making sure that as customer success, you're not siloed. And he mentioned that one of the approaches that he would take is he would basically just start a conversation, find out what that person cared about, and then basically kind of flip the tables where an idea would come up and he would frame it as, that's such a great idea that you had, right? So that it becomes, they feel ownership over it, even though it might have been something that he brought to the table. So that might be another thing to help bridge if there's friction in aligning those teams. So.
Yeah, and the reason I felt like I really had to explore that is that we had a problem where like our product and sales teams would make commitments to deals that they then would not deliver on. And then my team was stuck with like, we can only hack our way through this problem until like we've kicked the can down the road now the 4th time. Right. And so like, you know, we were having this issue where it's like, we were just frustrated with our team, and it's like, okay, we can't keep promising things we're not going to deliver because we can't code it ourselves, even if we want to. And other things will take priority, but like, how do we all just come to the table and agree to that? And it was objective, but I think also to a certain extent subjective. And so, you know, if you can build that kind of rapport, I think it helps.
Yeah, Cynthia, relationships, I believe, I agree, are absolutely key in any department, right? Because you're going to be, I always look at CS as kind of that glue, right, with all the other organizations. And so with product, it has to be super tight and a really good relationship. But to your point on sales and bringing in the right type of customers, that is a whole nother beast, because you know the reps might be getting compensated in a certain way that might drive a certain type of behavior. And so it's working with the leaders of the department heads on understanding, okay, well, how can we maybe modify this or change an incentive program? And I had to do that at one of my last organizations I worked at, is changing that behavior and how the reps are commissioned, essentially, right, to drive that type of behavior.
Yeah.
And then kind of set up these different milestones during, you know, pre-sales before they can get to the next stage, right, and qualifying it. Again, some of the stuff was very manual, but it was kind of the initial steps that were needed to pave the path until we could move in a better direction due to the technical debt and other things.
That's great. I'm curious, you know, if we look at that last kind of bullet that is on the page, the share examples of what's worked, or steps to bring CSM learnings to improve the product. I know the book talks a lot about, right, communities, or of course, as I mentioned earlier, looking for themes around a problem. Do you guys have any specific examples that you've encountered where either as customer success or elsewhere, you've had this great learning and you've had to deliver it to product? And I don't know, are there unique ways you've come to the learning and shared it with product, or ways you've partnered together to come to learnings that maybe weren't discussed in the book, something unique that, anyone have ideas?
I mean, I can go again. So one thing, there's a couple initiatives. We did an online community, but where I found the biggest impact was having it's mentioned, I think, in this chapter, but a product advisory council. So we had different boards. We had like a customer advisory board, but one specifically with product was a product advisory council. And I worked closely with product and our teams did, to find those customers that we deemed as could provide really good feedback from different verticals or different areas where we could learn from and understand where they're coming from. And these wouldn't necessarily be the executives of the team. These would be, you know, the IT folks, the folks that are in the tools and the platforms that could provide this valuable feedback. And we would have these quarterly sessions, right, that were virtual, and then an in-person one that would piggyback off of our software user group. But that was kind of a safe space that our product team and our customers were directly, and our customer success advisors would directly collaborate, and we could hear, and we would, value what they were saying, right? And it allows them to really feel open and build that transparency. But it also, on the other end, allowed our product team to hear from, the virtually on in person or whatever it might be, some of the pain points that they're experiencing or what they're looking to do from a strategy standpoint. And so I found that to work really well out of the different tools that we've tried out.
How did you go through the process of electing people to be a part of that product advisory team? Is it something that you kind of pinpointed and invited? Was it something where you used kind of a VIP approach?
Yeah, so it was something that it was initially targeted by the high value customers. So I talked about that segmentation matrix that allowed us to kind of find, all right, so let's go with these customers as a start, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it does require time from these individuals as well. And so what we try to do is we try to make it I think, what was it? We did like a half a year, like 6 months, and then we'd bring in a new group of customers. So it would be kind of a revolving thing, so we could learn from the different customers, and then they would have an opportunity, and that also helped with retention and so on and so forth.
Right. That's excellent. Yeah, it reminds me of the last session. A gentleman was mentioning Jeff. I think actually he's the one who Dana showed the video of, but Jeff mentioned something similar, at least as far as using webinars as VIP experiences, right? So that's why I was curious how you brought people into that, because I know he was saying they would do educational sessions for webinars, but it was, you are uniquely being invited and you can bring one person that you know to this. So that then of course it feels less like we know, of course, as customer success, that we're getting so much from these sessions, right? Because we get the feedback, but it also makes them feel empowered and makes them feel like they have a voice that is being heard uniquely. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
What else? Have any of you tried communities or anything like that for the product kind of information space?
So I just had a quick question for Alan. So what do you do if you are working with clients in a very, an industry that's kind of has a lot of compliance or legal restraints in terms of sharing, information with competition? How do you like get rid of those barriers, and how do you convince like a technical stakeholder within the account that you can attend, but you don't have to divulge anything that's could put you in.
So typically, we let them know that this is going to be, we didn't have anyone sign anything, or we didn't get to that stage like where anyone had to sign anything along those lines. But it really force people. It was if they wanted to have the opportunity. And so we did have some individuals that declined, right? And then we had some individuals that would participate that were in the same space. So the vertical that I'm talking about was restaurants, right? And brands. And so we might have, a Burger King and a McDonald's together, right? But they wouldn't divulge all of their things, right? They would kind of tiptoe around it. And then what we would do is we would meet offline with them, to hear more about what they talk about. But we cultivated that type of environment of trust, right? And that's kind of what we aim for. And some people opted for it and wanted to kind of put themselves out there, and which was great. And then others decided that they didn't want to, maybe they couldn't do it, right? So that was some other things, and that was fine as well.
And did you typically have to get, go through your champion, let's say it's a VP or C-level, obviously you want to let them know about the product advisory council and get their buy-in, right, as well?
Yeah, and so that's why we had a customer advisory board. So oftentimes there might be a C-level executive that's part of our customer advisory board that we would meet with and learn more of the strategy of the business. And then we had the product advisory board that would have, kind of the strategy behind the product side. And so what was interesting to see is that some of the goals or the perceptions of the business were different between the individual in the system and then the executive, right? And so oftentimes they did know that they were both attending. And so that's kind of how we oftentimes got that buy-in.
When do you think is too early? I was talking to one of my founders, and he doesn't think, like we have enough customers where it's worthwhile to do customer advisory board. We're about the range of 10 to 20 customers, more enterprise level ACV, but like, how do I convince them that we should do it even if we're working with a smaller portfolio?
I would say if you can do it without a huge budget, right? And so that's where virtual might come into play. Just if your business has Zoom license or GoToWebinar or whatever it might be, and you have, an email platform, even Outlook, right? You can just start really basic and go that route with just sending out emails, setting up a virtual webinar, and marketing it as, hey, and this is what we did. You're a select group we would love. You're one of our first deemed most important customers. We want to reach out to you and learn about, and you can help them feel special and get them engaged and show them that you value them as a customer to get their participation as well. So I would say to get the buy-in would be probably a cost-effective solution. And then being able to show that, hey, we can actually get results from this as well. So that's actually how it started off. And then we ended up going into an online community and then integrating the online community with the webinars and then eventually having it in person. And so it's an evolution for sure.
I think, like, to Alan's point too, if you can start when it is small, then you build some of those champions. Yes. So that if you grow the community, then you have active participants as part of that growing community. We didn't build one out, not for like some of those regulatory issues that you had, but we would just have a lot of issue with poaching because it was just a customer base that had a lot of turnover. And some of our champions didn't necessarily want that. But so what we did is that we focused them around product releases. So that's how we got around it, sort of. So we were like, here's this big product release. And we used a webinar specific model so that people could communicate with each other anonymously. And like we would be able to create a community around a product, et cetera. And then indirectly, when we knew our clients had issues, and we knew another client had a solution or a similar problem, we would put them in touch organically, and sort of like build some of that trust in us as their vendor, but also like in a community. And then we also joined communities around those industries. So like when we were in the surgical space, like I joined surgical association communities, and then I inserted my voice into those communities. And so it was a way to like kind of be a part of the community, get some feedback, obviously being careful not to feel like you're selling something, but different ways to attack it if you can't like just flat out build a community.
Yeah.
That's great. You also then get the opportunity of hearing from customers in a like space, right? So it's a double win. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm curious when you, Cynthia, when you mentioned actually building webinars around product releases, et cetera. Have you all, when it comes to product releases and thinking about the partnership with product and introducing customers to that, have you explored the opportunities to, as a VIP element, introduce certain customers to product roadmaps? How have you used those as tactics, like in partnering with product to say, hey, let's get feedback on this? And has that worked well, not worked? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, we use this specifically to leverage our renewals. So if we wanted to do a price increase, or if we wanted to, we knew we might face some challenge in raising a price, we would share our roadmaps and like bring in a product person and say, we want to get your perspective on this. We want to show you some mock-ups. Like we don't even have something built, but like here are some potential mock-ups. And we're bringing them to you because we think these would be the highest value impact new features or next features for you. And like I would have the team do that a quarter out, because it would take some time to, schedule, blah, blah, blah. So that once the renewal came up, even if the features weren't live yet, we could use them as part of negotiating price increases or like special portions of it. So that's how we tactically would use it internally. I think, yeah, that's really kind of like around how we use it. But we also did just like have, so we worked where there were like independent companies and then companies that were our clients who were joint ventures as part of larger management companies and enterprises. And so we would also strategically pick some of those in order to try to create more market share, right? And try to like build bigger relationships. So yes, we wouldn't publish our roadmap. I know some companies do that and that's awesome, but that wasn't us. But we would bring in some of those key features in and have some of those meetings, but we always had a product person there because we didn't want to make any promises, but we also, if the features weren't really what that client was looking for, then we would scapegoat the product team in like the most professional way possible. But like, we just didn't want to damage our relationship with the client. And we would do that vice versa, right? Like we would tell the team we were going to go do that. We're like, okay, I can't mess up my relationship. And so we're
throwing you under the bus behind your back, but yes. That's great. That's great. What other, I'd love, I know we've got a bit more time, 10 more minutes, and then I think we pop back into the group chat in about 5 minutes. I'll let you all know when I get the alert. But what other, I'd love any other tactics that we haven't talked about, things that you love, things that you want to try that you've heard of.
I think my biggest challenge was just like scaling, and just because I think, at least from my perspective, it felt like it was a question you just had to keep coming back to. Even after the first time I segmented, I had to come back and resegment and I think that was just, will obviously be my ongoing challenge, but that was probably the biggest one that I faced. Is just scaling, even scaling with product.
Right, absolutely.
And I don't have answers.
And I would love to get, it's funny as a startup also, I have a direct line of voice to our head of product, but I know that that's not forever. So I'm basking in it while I have it. But yeah, scale I think is something that's always a struggle. Fred, I know you had
just something I was thinking about in the initial, I think, question was I was speaking to a product manager at a company here in Chicago and just said, how does your team work closely with your CS team? And she's like, well, one of the things that she brought up was they use a tool called Product Board, which I thought was pretty interesting. It basically took all feedback, whether it was from support, CS, maybe active listening that they have on the internet, and just kind of brought all that information into this tool, and somehow it filtered out down into the product team. So I don't know who owns that, obviously products, but maybe CS could be a part of that as well in order to prioritize what actually is going to be addressed. But I thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
That's a great idea. I don't know if you all saw, the pop-up just came up. We're 7 seconds back to the room. You guys have shared such great ideas today. Thank you so much. I hope that.
All right, cool. We are now recording. Got Greg and Glenn on the call here. So I'm going to show just one slide that we're going to be covering. So we've got marketing, which is chapter 10. And marketing in partnership with customer success is just, it's this really cool, unexpected, in my mind, unexpected sort of partnership that exists across different departments in customer success, in the SaaS model. So let me share just one slide here. Let me bring it up. Here we go. And of course, it didn't actually present it the way I wanted to. So I'm just going to share it in desktop mode, and you guys are going to have to really zoom in to see this if you can't for whatever reason. So my breakout here, this breakout is all about marketing, right? So what does marketing do? How do you partner with customer success? What's the actual engagement model look like? And then really focusing and zooming in on one particular area, which is voice of the customer. So want to just cover just a high level summary. What are some of the things that we've covered? So Greg, I know you read the chapter. It's probably still fresh in your mind. You want to give a little bit of a synopsis of what kind of caught your attention in this chapter, and in particular with marketing and voice of the customer?
Yeah, because I worked in product development earlier in my career where marketing and sales, we were aligned together. But once a customer was actually sold, it became more of the operational side in terms of customer support to maintenance that customer. It was like we were only focused on bring in the new funnel, keep the leads coming. And this was a bit of a change to that, right? Is how do you partner with your customer success team to continue not only to work your new logos, but also your existing base?
Yeah.
And that concept of collaborating and sharing that data and having that 360 view of your customer to understand where they are in their journey, where those handoffs are occurring. yeah, completely different from my past experience, obviously.
Very much so. And I think part of the challenge comes in that one of the first things you talked about there, right? It's the difference between a pre-sale and a post-sale customer is a whole, like it's a world of difference. And a lot of times in marketing in particular, it kind of gets stuck in their brain that the only people we talk to are prospects. The only people we talk to are those that we're just trying to get some basic understanding of what our product does, not to those people that have been using the product for some period of time. And I don't think this is just a marketing problem in any way, right? This is a customer success. We have a problem with this as well, because like, why are you going to talk to my customer? Why are you going to potentially reach out to people that have already been using the product for years or months or whatever? So definitely it's an area of some growth and opportunity in terms of engagement. Glenn, do you have any experience in terms of like how customer success and marketing actually work together?
Well, my background's more kind of customer experience and voice of the customer sort of strategies. And it's interesting just hearing there what Greg was saying about the kind of the post-sales. I mean, I think we tend, when voice of the customer, we'll look at the things like surveys, you know, primarily, but we tend to ignore all the other kind of channels, such as complaints, escalations, all that great stuff. And effective voice of the customer covers the whole kind of gamut, even the pre-sales, before the customer knows what they want. You know, so then you're having your social media and all that good stuff. So that's what drew me to this session, Josh, was that voice of the customer element.
Okay. So I think we can probably start back on the initial part of this chapter was really talking about how do you actually strategize with marketing. I've got my copy of the book here on my phone, so forgive me if I'm scrolling through this real quick. But there's some very interesting steps that the authors do call out around how do you get these two seemingly disparate groups to actually start talking to each other. And Greg, this is going to probably resonate with you because you just read this, right? So aligning on the customer journey is totally important, right? And we've got to make sure that whatever messaging, whatever stages we have for our customer as they're maturing from, hey, I bought the product, to, hey, I'm successful with the product and I want to renew, each step along the way is going to require some sort of coordination, and making sure that marketing and customer success both agree to what those steps are and what milestones we're going to be measuring against is going to be super critical for actually having a meaningful program and collaboration between the two. And Glenn, to your point, as we move closer to like creating those listening posts of voice of the customer, those all tie into this basic foundational thing of like, what is that collaboration supposed to look like? How do we actually think about what customers are doing with us when they are one of our customers? Second step is adopting shared goals. And I'm going to blow through some of these things. I'll stop and ask you guys questions about what comes to mind when you talk about these things, right? So adopting shared goals. One of the things that I've found that worked great with sales and is now starting to work really good with marketing is that when I can come into a conversation with a sales rep and say, look, one of my goals is revenue protection so that you can decrease your quota next year, right? If I do my job saving customers, then you don't have to put as much effort to achieving your quota because your quota is going to be a little bit lower. The same thing applies for marketing. If marketing and customer success actually have a shared goal of retention and of actually acquiring new contacts within existing customers, then you get a baseline of understanding between the two departments that actually helps set some really good precedent for what's gonna come down the line in terms of projects and activities in terms of marketing, customer success, collaboration. Any thoughts on that?
Just going back to your point one there about the collaboration between sales and customer success and kind of the customer's touch points. Again, I think it's important to stress that those touch points should be from the customer's view. Mm-hmm. So it's not an organization's interpretation of these are the key touch points. It's actually putting yourself in the customer's shoes. What are those key touch points and addressing it that way? I think if you interpret what's important to the customer and you widen the mark, that element there about engaging with sales and look, your quota is going to be easier next year, it's actually going to have the reverse. It's going to be more difficult because you're imposing what you think rather than what the customer understands.
That's true. You're right. Well, and I think part of this is something that we tend to, so customer success in particular, I think, and even software as a service companies in general, we tend to have a very inside out perspective on things that are happening with customers, right? And to your point, and what we're going to talk about in the voice of the customer, is that it's a very outside in perspective that we kind of have to take off the vendor hat for a little bit and put on the customer hat and really think about, what does that actually look like? From the outside, are we doing the right things? Are we actually creating the right opportunities for customers to give us feedback? Not just give us feedback, but actually have meaningful interactions with them. So any other thoughts on adopting shared goals between marketing and customer success?
Yeah, so back in my world, Josh, customer success was called retention. And it was one small aspect of what customer success was, right? So we went from these silos of, hey, I'm in the marketing department, I really don't talk to our retention folks. And then they actually got us engaged and said, look at what it cost us in terms of turnover, that churn number. And once you realized how much revenue was going out of the bucket, it didn't matter how much you were throwing at the top. Like, you had to repair that hole in the bucket. That was first and foremost.
That's right.
And that retention team had so much of a better understanding of the way in which the customer was using it than the marketing folks did, by far. And they had so much information. And it was originally, they had their own version of a wiki, and we didn't have access to it. Vice versa. So the left foot had no idea what the right foot was doing. I mean, we were completely opposed to one another and just basically kicking each other, you know, constantly. So opening that up and sharing that information was huge.
Well, and actually that segues really nicely into the third step in terms of this collaboration effort, is sharing of data, right? So if you're not sharing data between the groups, between the different parts of the organization, and particularly with marketing and with customer success, the voice of the customer is not going to actually be captured anywhere. It's not going to be meaningful, and it's not going to be actionable. So sharing data is one of those things that it eliminates silos, right? That's the last thing that we want to have, is a siloed sort of organization where, hey, marketing is doing their own thing, sales is doing their own thing, customer success or retention, the way you called it, right? They're doing their own thing. And if they're not communicating with each other, then you're absolutely right. It's right hand, left hand. No one knows what the other one is doing. And it creates a disparate sort of experience for customers, because then they don't know, like, I just told your other department that we're doing this thing. Why are you asking me this? You should go talk to your other counterparts in the other department. And that clunkiness creates a really bad experience for customers across the board. The next step that we have, or that was called out in the book, was collaborating on one-to-many, or quote unquote tech touch customers and communications, right? So really, really narrowing down, like, what do we mean when we talk about customer marketing? Like, how do we define who's going to talk to customers on a regular basis, and what is the content itself going to look like, right? So from an inside out perspective, Glenn, you know, calling you out in terms of the voice of the customer experience, right? Customers need to hear some basic information from us as a vendor, so that they know that they're informed about big things that are coming down the line. But there is such a thing as having really good, effective communication that is on the mass scale level, that doesn't necessarily need to come from an individual person. So coordinating who and what that messaging is going to look like, in terms of marketing is going to send out this mass campaign that has the new features and new product elements or whatever. That's really helpful for customers to actually be able to hear from, without it necessarily needing to be a one-by-one sort of communication that happens from a CSM to their individual customers all the time. Would you agree with that?
I would. The reservation I have, and as we're just taking a step back there, was, I think mass marketing's okay, but as a customer, I want that whiff and factor, you know, the what's in it for me. So I think marketing, again, from that kind of inside out, if it's mass, it may be just another piece of marketing. It's a nice app, but what gives them the competitive advantage, that edge, understanding their operating environment? So maybe that's more of like the kind of the CSM role, that kind of bespoke marketing. Built from, I've never been in marketing, But as a kind of customer experience person, that was one of the feedbacks I got. Yeah, you're telling us a lot of information. It's great, but so what? For me, what does that mean? And it's that personalizing, I think, that it really needs to have effect.
Yeah, you're right. And I think there is a personalization factor that goes into play here. I think this is where we can leverage each other from a marketing and customer success perspective, right? Marketing, you're absolutely right, has this focus on mass being the primary impetus for their engagement model, whereas customer success is very much focused on that individual relationship. Like, I make a connection with you, Glenn, and that relationship matters, right? But from an informational perspective, I think there's definitely balance points that we can find across both of those. We can say, look, marketing sends out these big mass campaigns, and then we as customer success come back in and follow up with that personal touch to actually say, hey, you got an email from marketing, here's what we can do about it, right? It's a two-pronged attack in terms of how the customer is getting information and the way that we're actually leveraging it for the customer's eventual success.
I mean, the reason to raise that, Josh, is we talked about voice of the customer. And again, I just see a marketing, and that collaboration. I see kind of marketing campaigns that are not tied in with that voice of the customer. So the customers, by whatever channel, are telling us one thing. This is what's important to me. This is the issues I have. And then we send a generic marketing campaign out. Sometimes the customers, you know, I've told you all this, you're continuing to send me this.
Yeah.
So rather than having a desired outcome of, hey, buy our products, this is what we're doing, sometimes, and again, I've seen this from an experience point of view, it has the opposite.
Yep.
You know, you're not listening to me.
That's absolutely right. And this actually does segue really nicely into what exactly, how do we partner for voice of the customer projects and initiatives? Because you're absolutely right. Marketing, if we're not careful, if we're not tied together at the hip with customer success and marketing together, actually working on this process, then it is a very strong possibility that they're going to get a very disjointed, sort of disconnected, siloed sort of information that has very little pertinence to the things that are actually being done in the regular sort of engagement with the customer success rep, right? So as we dig into voice of the customer in particular, Greg, is there something in particular that caught your eye when we talked about voice of the customer when the book was covering some of this stuff?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Glenn was saying there, which you were adding some color and context to as well. You've got marketing who has the expertise of crafting messages, that skill set of going one-to-many in big campaigns. But to y'all's point, if it misses the mark, it's not effective. And that bridging that gap of you're leveraging marketing's expertise, but you also need the CSM's expertise of what are those business outcomes? What's the value?
That's right.
What's that product's capability that can tie those guys together so that you do drive actual value to your end user, right?
Yep, you're absolutely right. And I think this is where, as we read into what chapter 10 was talking about with voice of the customer in particular, there were a couple of takeaways for me that I think really caught my attention. Number one was that continuity that we're talking about here, right? The messaging that comes on the mass level needs to be continuously reinforced at the individual level. And I think if that disconnect happens, then we are missing an opportunity to create a really good customer experience. And there was a formula that they brought up in the book, which was CS equals CO plus CX, right? So customer success equals customer outcomes plus customer experience. And that formula is so true. It's simplistic in a lot of ways, right? Like the customer outcomes need to be like ingrained in everything that we do, but it's not just about the outcomes. It's about how we make the customer feel about those outcomes and how we make them feel about the way that they're being treated and engaged with across all different mediums, whether that's a mass email or whether that's the individual personal touch that happens.
That's what's so beautiful about that formula, right? You got CS is equal to CO plus CX. That is a very simplistic concept. It's very easy to understand, but the devil's in the detail.
Yep.
What should you do to achieve those, and what shouldn't you do to ruin those things?
Yeah,
that's where it gets incredibly complex.
So there was a interesting example that was given And it's funny because I've seen it in a number of situations at companies that I've been a part of, right? So a customer sends in, you guys have done NPS surveys in the past, I'm assuming, right? You've done NPS surveys, either sent them out to customers or received them as a customer, right? Mm-hmm. You know that they are kind of a snapshot in a moment in time that says, hey, how are you feeling? What are you are you willing to be a promoter for us? Are you willing to talk about us in a good light? And either if you're filling it out, you're like, yeah, cool, sure, no problem. I'll fill it out and I'll give you a 9 out of 10. Or in some cases you're upset, I'll give you a 2 or a 3, right? What's kind of interesting is that data capture can be very disconnected from the actual ongoing sort of relationship stuff that happens. That self-reporting versus the behaviors that are actually being done. You can have a customer that responds very, very well to an NPS survey and actually ends up turning within a matter of weeks, because the disconnect between self-reporting and behaviors is so strong. It's so like, there's such a big disparate connection between those. And I think it's because of the fact that you've got people that are different roles that are responding to NPS than the people that are actually doing the work.
Or even better, you've got an executive who's responding to your NPS, and now they're out the door, they've gone to another job for whatever reason, right? And as you're saying, you realize way too late, it's kind of like the Titanic, you've hit the iceberg.
That's right.
At that point, you realize, uh-oh, we're in trouble. And yes, you're likely churning that customer.
And the problem with NPS as well, a number of organizations get fixated on the scar. So whether it's a 2 or 9, but the emotion behind it, the verbatim, that tends to be ignored. And that's one of the, in the customer experience, well, one of the reservations about NPS as a measure. It's okay, it's indicative, but as you say, come next week, you could lose that business because you've just taken a snapshot in time, which is why at the start of this, I stressed surveys are just one part of the VOC channel. You need to look at the whole kind of gamut.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think this is where we get into what are the different flavors of things. Like, so I love cooking, right? And cooking is one of those things that you can create stuff out of nothing, and you can create some really cool combined effects by mixing different ingredients. Voice of the customer is kind of like that finished dish that's out there, but there's many different ingredients that goes into it. And Glenn, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the different ingredients. What are the things, what are the listening posts? What are the mechanisms? What's the follow-up and the specific like actionability items that we have for a good voice of the customer dish to be presented or to be actually enjoyed?
Yeah, well, if you imagine the voice of the customer is the cake, all right?
Yeah, there you go.
In that, you've got your surveys, you've got your survey programs, but I would say there's not just a one survey program. Depending on who you're surveying, you customize your survey program. So you might have your NPS for your operational, you'll have a strategic survey for your senior guys, your C-suite people. You might have transactional surveys for those day-to-day interactions. So you're getting the kind of the whole surveys. You know, some you'll want detail, others you just want a quick snapshot. So that's your surveys. Then there's your complaints. Yeah, so customers actually approaching you with an expression of dissatisfaction. Would you not only look at why they're complaining, because that's how it manifests itself to the customer. So Josh, I might say, your engineer was late again, as an example.
Sure.
You do kind of the analysis and the deep dive into why that was late. And it could be that you've not got enough skilled engineers. So the actual root cause is different than how it manifests itself to the customer. You've got things like, I would suggest social media. So here in the UK, we have Trustpilot. Okay. I know in the States, you've got your own kind of consumer social media sites. You've got your Twitter, all that good stuff. Again, where they're not coming to you directly, but word of mouth, it can damage your brand.
Yep.
Then you've got your kind of your escalations and expedite. So where your lead times are not fit for purpose, or where you can't deliver it against your lead time. So again, another sourcing. So the reason I mentioned that is what I saw in my previous role was sales guys promising the earth to get the business.
Yep.
It comes downstream, you can't deliver it. So again, where is the issue? Is it your lead times are too long? No, the lead times are fine. It's just we're not managing the expectations up front. Yeah. Then you've got your regulatory bodies. So again, maybe governments. You've got your senators. We've got our MPs, where they're out there with the customers. Again, raised that way. So this whole kind of gamut of voice of the customer. And if you imagine, kind of, you've got this data reservoir, and it's bringing it all together and then interrogating that data to give you the true voice of the customer. Now, you might find these things that underlie each of your sectors, maybe some sector specific. Yep. So the financial markets might have something different from your energy markets. Yeah, and it's bringing those items together. And then the key is here, Josh, is you've got your voice of the customer, so you've got your nice little cake, but you need to tie that in with the voice of the business data then. So that's great. The customers are telling this. You go away then and interrogate the business data, bring the two together, and that'll drive the improvement programs. And that's then where you bring in your sales, your marketing, your marketing from kind of you said, we did.
Yep.
This is what you've told us, Mr. Customer. This is what we've done. This is a benefit to you, coming back to that whiffing factor.
Yeah.
That's a very kind of high level, run through the voice of the customer, but that's how you bring it all together.
Yeah. And so the book actually had a couple of interesting, like if you were summarizing it in like a 3-word phrase, right? They have it as listen, act, and analyze, right? So
much better.
I'm not trying to upstage you here at all, Glenn. It's what the book says, right? So, and Greg, maybe you can add in on this, right? So listening is just basically like, we've got these listening posts. They happen at very specific times. We've got a very prescriptive manner in which we're going to listen and how it's going to be, that data is going to be captured. For me, I think the most important one is the acts, right? What do you do when you hear feedback from a customer? What's the actual response? What's the actionability? Who's responsible for it? Like, then we create the RACI charts of like what everyone is supposed to do. And then from there, do the analyzing and analysis around like, okay, how do we improve? How do we take this information, not only what we've done with the customer, but now internally, how do we handle it so that we're pushing forward for when new customers come on board? How are we going to make it better for them? Greg, do you want to comment on how this is actually maybe, resonated with you, or some ideas that came up when you were reading this?
Yeah, I love the concept of the listen, act, analyze, especially the analyze part of trying to validate what the customer is saying with what the customer is doing.
Yeah, that was a good point. Yeah.
I thought that was fantastic. And I absolutely loved tying the voice of the customer program back to the actual life cycle and mapping those to your specific outcomes, right? So when you go from close one to onboarding, you're surveying in between there, the feedback that you're receiving, that you're tagging them between that onboarding and the first value that you're deriving for them. I mean, they do a really good job of just laying it out to where you're like, yeah, that's what I want to say.
Would you agree, and maybe this is a question for both of you guys, right? Would you agree that voice of the customer is not a standalone event? It's not a once and done thing. It's not even a multiple time thing. It's a continuous, like, yeah, there's milestones, and yes, there's certain elements that we want to call out to, like specific transitions or handoffs. But it is a continuous process that needs to go and be fully ingrained in the customer journey, and therefore fully ingrained with the customer success experience as well. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh, definitely, it's an ongoing. I mean, the voice of the customer. You can have voice of the customer third hand. So, right. Greg's a sales guy there, and he's meeting his customers, and the customer says, "Hey, Greg, we had this." That's voice of the customer. It's every interaction. Yeah, you have. So it's definitely ongoing process.
Yeah, because that life cycle doesn't stop.
That's right.
It's going to continuously go, and you've got to be able to put your finger on, get that pulse. Yep. So it is that consistent, feedback. And I absolutely love that expression. You can get a different department. It could be a friend of yours who is a executive at another organization that happened to be speaking to that company, and you're getting feedback through that channel. And importantly, is building that 360 view that everyone in your organization can see, they can modify, they can add input to, so that we're all singing from the same sheet of music, as opposed to we're different songs in different books.
Yeah, so I worked at another company a few years back, and we would have customers call in with an issue, right? They would say that something was wrong, and they would raise their hand and say, I need some help. And immediately we would have 5 different departments all reaching out to the customer independently of each other, with no coordination, with no collaboration. We called it the hug of death, right? We all love the customers. We all want to help them out. We all want to make sure that they're getting their problem solved. But everyone, since there was no coordination, it just created this weird like tsunami of information that the customer is trying to do. And then we'd have to come back in and pick up the pieces as customer success because there was no coordination. I think one of the other big takeaway that I would say that came from me in this chapter was intentionality matters, right? Intentionality and proactivity matters. We've got to be very specific about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and when we're doing it together or apart, right? And that coordination is probably more difficult than just the statement of this fact, right? That coordination is probably the biggest challenge that we have in customer success to make that a good experience for the customer. Because that's what it all boils back down to. If we're not creating a good experience back to the customer, even with good customer outcomes, we're not going to actually have good customer success.
Yeah, I love that last portion of the book there in this chapter of whoever owns that process with voice of the customer. If you're surfacing, data that's relevant to your support team, to your product team, to your sales team, it's incumbent upon you to be able to share that information.
Yeah.
Versus siloing it and being like, oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that to you. I probably should have. Sorry about that.
Right. Yeah, exactly right.
And that's why I see kind of the customer experience role, whatever you want to call it, sits. So you've got your pillars, your silo functions, whether it's your sales, assurance, delivery, etc. But the experience kind of sits above it. So it brings it all together. So that sort of consistent message, because you're absolutely right. If you've got one of the pillars going out to the customer saying, we've done this for you, Mr. Customer, excellent. But it's with their own kind of business interpretation on it. So they're positioning it by its very nature, making themselves consciously or subconsciously looking the best light possible. So to the customer, right, you've got that piece of dress. What about the other bit, the pre-sales, the post-sales? So you're right, it needs to be a joined up, consistent message. Otherwise, it confuses the customer. And then you pick that up in your next voice of the customer initiative.
Yeah, that's right. So let me ask you guys a question that's not necessarily included in the book or anything, just something off the top of my head. What do you do when you're missing that across the channel sort of customer experience role? Who should do that in absence of a formal department?
Well, the textbook says everybody. We all own customer experience.
Yes.
But I mean, ultimately, I'd have to say a kind of a C-suite senior manager. I sit above it, and if there isn't that role, it's for them to sort one out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they did a great job of saying the CEO must own customer success.
I must get this book.
Glenn's literally, it's like, I mean, are you?
Yeah.
It's like he's just. Yeah. I just see Glenn doing this, and changing the page, and right into his brain. It's impressive. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. If you don't have support from the C-level executive team, and there's not a C-level executive who's responsible for that retention number, because you got a VP of sales, and they own a number, that new sales number. And once you realize, hey, that retention number depends on how new the business is, but that retention number is going to exceed that new sales number. Eventually, it's going to happen. Yep. And at that point, when you say we need a customer success department, too late. Like you're in trouble.
So
because I can tell you that was my experience in my previous world in telecommunications. By the time that they realized, oh goodness, we're losing business at the rate of 10% a month.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, yeah, because the focus was on driving new sales. Because we were a private firm and we were receiving capital venture money based on how many new lines we were turning up, not collectively every month. And then literally a year later, that's when things changed and said, no, it's about retention. Because they realized all the money was going out the back of the bucket. So,
well, it's always going to be cheaper to keep a customer than to try and get in. Just by default. It's so expensive to acquire a new customer in any.
And it was so much easier to explain to sales when you were working with the sales team from the marketing perspective as to which deals are likely to happen that you need based on what we're being judged on this quarter. So if we were being judged on, hey, we just need net new revenue, we're probably going to make some deals. But if they're saying, no, we're now being judged on gross margin, that's a different metric, and you're not going to get that same benefit that you received the past quarter.
That's right.
And it's interesting, we talked about the channels for voice of the customer, and another one is just, well, listen to Greg talk there, is you look at your win-loss reports, you know, you look at your contract renewals, margin, you look at why a customer's not renewing, why are they taking the business elsewhere. It may be a cost, but I would suggest that it's a lot deeper than that. There are underlying reasons of purely cost. It may be value for money, I get that, but purely on cost, it's normally a bit deeper. That's another channel, you know, that needs to be brought into this big data lake of VOC data.
Definitely.
An interesting one, sorry, just sprung to is exit surveys. You know, we talked there about churn. You lose a customer if you've got the relationship there beforehand. You know, so Greg, one of your customers, they leave. What's to stop you ringing them up and say, look, you've left, we miss you, but I just want to know, so we can improve, and hopefully when you come back to us, you'll experience a much better organisation. What was it about us that made you leave? You know, get insight that way. You won't always get it, but it's worth asking the question.
Yeah, I think that data capture is it's so critical, no matter what stage of the customer journey they're at. Whether it's a brand new customer or it's a customer that's decided to churn, it's absolutely critical.
Yeah, one of the most effective thing is when we were required to actually get onto customer support calls. Because when I was in marketing, hey, we were completely insulated.
Yeah.
But once you started to deal with the customers and the complaints that they were having, you're like, man, this really opens your eyes to the actual business process and the effect that you have on it throughout your organization. So yeah, every month we had to sit in there for 2 hours taking calls. And at first it was really awkward because you get some people who are really happy, you get some people who are not. But eventually, yeah, it gave you a lot more of a compassionate, empathetic understanding for why people were staying with you or potentially leaving you.
And it's probably not for this call, but talking to your employees, those people who are at the coalface, dealing with customers day in, day out. So like Greg said, that we used to call it a day in the life. So you get senior managers sit in, answer the calls, brilliant, but engage your employees as well who experience that day in, day out, because they know, you know, they know what's upsetting the customers.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of going on sales calls when I would visit cities. And I mean, we went in all sorts of businesses. The things I've seen, you know, but it quickly gave you an understanding for, man, sales is hard. Like we got pulled out of several buildings, you know, I'm in a suit and they're like, beat it, chump. You know? So you're like, okay, so do we just leave? They're like, no, they need to tell us at least 2 or 3 times. I was like, okay.
All right, guys, so we're running out on time here. Real quick, write down a couple of takeaways, something that really struck home with you in terms of things that really resonated around the marketing customer success partnership. Before we leave, I do want to take a quick screenshot of our smiling faces. Let's make sure I got
let me get rid of it.
Hold on. 1, 2, 3. All right, got it. Thank you. And yeah, it looks like we can get back into the room 44 seconds. So quick takeaway, and then we will see you in the big room. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Appreciate it, Josh.
Cheers, thank you.
Good meeting you, Glenn.
And you, Greg. Cheers, Josh.
Cheers.
Not waiting for them. He's driving them. He's, you know, calling them out when they're going to do something dangerous that puts their projects at risk. He knows how to have the executive level and the technical level, brings the right resources into play when like it's a product issue or it's a strategy issue, how to make the customer feel heard, even though we're not going to change the product because we never did that fast. So,
yeah, because that's reality, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. You can't just like, oh yeah, let me turn that on for you. Sorry, I didn't know. But you know, like he's very good at reading the room of what is needed And even when it's him kind of having to play bad cop and making sure that he is a good cop while he's playing bad cop and playing good cop and bringing a bad cop, like he really understands the dynamics of how to get a customer going in the right direction. Now
Hello.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Renee said. I think the good customer success teams really understand the leads coming in, because they're looking at these opportunities, and when there could be a plug and play of enabled services that would really work for the client for the outcome that they're trying to get. I think they speed to, instead of the sales team going and farming and looking for it, you really get the CSM's help to really pull that lead in. And also really know it will sabotage an opportunity because of the current conditions on the client, because the CSMs are constantly in touch and in the life cycle with the client.
So you said the magic word there, right, Chris? It was outcome. That's what I was hoping someone would say, is that, because let's go back to this, right? And we do this, all right? This to me, so I put this here at the end because that's all to do with how, you know, when you get to that renewal, why you renewal, why you're upselling. But this here is the important part, the outcome plan. What did we sell them? What was the value proposition for what we sold them? And how are we going to define that and measure it and all of these things? So yeah, thank you for that. That was good. And the other thing I heard from Renee was this, right? The customer must feel and be, yeah, you've got to feel them, right? You've got to love your customers, right? So let's have a little discussion about this, because I've heard two different sides of this argument, right? If somebody is a customer success person, they're a customer advocate. Great. I think that's probably the right thing. But at what point are you an advocate for the customer versus the company who's paying your paycheck? All right. Yeah, I see a few nods there, right? I see a few nods. So anyone want to start that discussion?
I love when I get especially because I work in startups, right? So they come up with a company and they get very customer passionate and almost intolerant of the company, not like, because in the early days, like we used to do code changes or feature requests on the fly. And as you grow and scale, like they become super intolerant of the company's inability to be flexible. And they get almost more indignant than the customers. It's a really interesting phenomenon, and because they've lost the balance of the company, and they've just married the customer. It's like you almost need to go work for that company rather than our company. So it's one of the pitfalls of kind of startups that you have to watch and kind of keep fostering with them, is that balance of like, how are we going to grow and scale? How are we going to keep all these customers happy? What are we going to look like at this size and this growth, and really keep them going? Otherwise you can get some really challenging conversations from internal.
Yeah, that's a good. And you said something there that just tickled my interest as well. Is this you know, when you're a startup and you've got one customer, you do whatever it takes, right?
Yeah.
You do whatever it takes. But there comes a point where so we've just gone through this in the last year with Site Machine. We had 27 customers. Every single one of them was on a different version.
Snowflakes.
Yeah. And it was, man, it was painful. But the CEO was just like, how do we handle this? And to me, it's, you go and talk to your customers. You know, you benefited from this, and thank you very much for helping us develop this part of the application. We're going to make that GA, okay? But there's a bit of pain involved in this, and it's going to be the following, you know, how we redeploy and re-implement. And most of the time, they kind of like, they dig that, right? But the other thing that I try to tell salespeople is this. Sales guys, love them to bits, right? This journey that we're on now with customer success, you know, the continuum, whatever you want to call it, the infinity loop. I'm sure you've seen all of these before. The analogy I say is, it's like when you go to a wedding, right? You've all been to a wedding, some probably been to your own, I would hope, okay? But you go to a wedding, that's the start of it, isn't it? That's the start of the relationship. Yeah, you've fallen in love, you got married and everything. But then it's like it becomes the same but different after the wedding day, right? Going forward. And it's how you're learning how to live with one another. And that's the analogy I like to use, is that, yeah, we can get them to the altar, sales can get them to the altar, they can get them to sign. Then what do you do afterwards, right? What do you do after the wedding dinner and the honeymoon and stuff like that? So yeah, I like that, Ray. That was a good story. That was a good story. And the other thing I think you were implying as well is top-down accountability, making sure people care, because I've heard it 50 times from my own CEOs. Yeah, we care. No, we don't. Yes, we do. No, we don't. Right. And then we all have this, especially in early stage startups, right? Like, sounds like you're like where I am right now, Renee. You do whatever you can to keep that from churning, right? If someone wants to churn, you're all over them like a rash, aren't you? Mm-hmm. All over them like a rash. Yeah. So I know, is this a good discussion? Because I thought, I didn't want to go what Dana told me to do, because I thought it was a bit uninteresting, but it's really, you know, if we go back to this, didn't understand that advocacy isn't merely nice to have, it's essential. So I think we've talked about that. And the renewal is bigger than our new number. So I reread this from Nick, and really what he's trying to say there is, especially for, you know, early turn, you know, BCs, startups, retention is as important, right? As important and as getting your customer in the first place and keeping them, right? You know what I'm saying? All right. Okay, what else? So is that good so far? Anyone want to add
the one thing that came up is if you've got the wedding, right, and you've got the marriage, and then you move into the reality of that relationship, then I guess the CSM would be the like marriage therapist, right? Being the go-between between the two people and making sure that everyone feels heard and gets what they need from the relationship.
Yeah, I never thought of that. That's right. Thank you. That's what I'll be using from now on. Therapy.
Sales is the dating. I mean, it's the flowers, it's the dinners, it's the taking them to play golf. It's those types of things is the dating process. But once they're married, CSM have to take that responsibility, and I think therapist is a great.
So that's an interesting, right, Barb? Because, you know, what do a lot of married couples do? Some have date nights, you know, religiously every week, every 2 weeks, something like, you know, I still come home, you know, when I used to travel, which I haven't for a long time, always come back with something for my wife and my children. And that's kind of it. It's like, it's the give and the get thing, Yeah. Yeah. I like that, Barb. Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Yeah, indeed. And thanks, Cindy, for that. I'm going to steal that. It's therapy. I love that.
I also, Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Cindy.
Oh, I was going to say then is the expansion the children?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
I would love to. Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
Yeah, I was just going to say one of the challenges I've had is kind of the trough of disillusionment from the sales cycle. The dating persona versus the reality persona is, so I call that the trough of disillusionment. And my goal is to make that as small as I can between sales and the reality, and CS is that kind of like reality check. But I do struggle when, because sales wants a frictionless sales cycle, wants it to all be easy, you know, and doesn't necessarily want to highlight some of the potential opportunities for organizational change and staffing requirements and the things that are going to be required to be successful. Getting them to be excited about talking about that during a sales cycle, or even letting somebody talk about it in a sales cycle is, you know, it's one thing. They're like, oh, well, you can come talk, and then you come talk, and they're like, no, you can't come talk anymore because like you might screw up my deal. So I'm curious if anybody has any skills around that. I mean, without, you know, setting myself up for my own trough of disillusionment, you know?
Well, for one, I mean, I'll respond to that. I spent the first 7.5 years of my sales career as a partner to the software vendor versus the software vendor. The software vendor salespeople and services salespeople are very much on the same page. And so the implementers come in and the CSMs come in and they get blasted in the face with the fire of the customer because the customer says, wait a minute, you showed me this, you told me this, none of that's happening. Whereas when I was a partner, I had to sell my own product. My product was the services and the implementation. So I had to give them some reality because I was in competition with other vendors that were in the same boat or with the software vendor often. And so, you know, I was telling a story yesterday about a case study. I went into a client, she said, what can you do for us for $50,000? I said, nothing. I mean, so by the time I finished with them a couple of days later, they signed a $500,000 contract because I gave them reality. They appreciated that. And so when my implementers came in, my implementers didn't have to come in and undo all the crap I had told them or all the lies I had told them or whatever you want to call it, sales fluff, whatever you want to call it. But they didn't have to undo all of that because I told the customer, this is going to be hard. This is a journey. This is this is that, you know, you get what you pay for, you know, all of those things. And so I definitely saw a lot of success in that particular role. And I think that so many salespeople miss that. They think that, especially software guys, they think if they tell them if they show under the covers anything that's not perfect, that they're going to miss out on the sale. I think customers appreciate it. They've implemented enough software in their careers that they know nothing goes perfect and every project goes over budget. And, you know, so they know all those things. So I think when you talk like that, you can see a lot more success. And then when the CSM gets the customer, they're able to take them and just lead them from the path they're already on.
So that's interesting. So I've been involved in 2 of those with Barb in my previous life, and I can vouch for that's exactly what this lady does. We were working with a sales guy this was Matt, right? Who he couldn't have been any more slippery if you tried. I mean, he was, you know, you can't say that, you can't say that. Exactly that. Anything that introduced risk into his sales cycle, he didn't want to talk about. Anyway, Barb gets on the phone with this customer and we're talking about the implementation, right? And it was high, low, it doesn't matter, it's reality. And Matt was like, no, you can't present that, it's far too much money. So Barb gets on the phone with these people and talks them through exactly what she'd set up for, and that's the term used, I'm setting you up for success, not for horror stories, and took them through that. And what happened, Barb? Did we get the deal or what?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we did, right? Yeah, we did. And because of that, that customer is facing as much reality. You're talking about your trough, right, Renee? Is if we can help them take that and make that a little bit smoother during the sales cycle as well. So the other thing that I do like to pontificate on is exactly that. It's not just about sales, services, customer success. You are the triumvirate of success for that customer. Okay, and it's most sales guys, especially these crusty old ERP, you know, these guys that have been selling big iron, they don't like that at all. But it's the new reality, right? It's the new reality. I was chatting with the CRO of Blue Yonder last week or the week before. He's a friend of mine, and he was telling me that he's getting calls from all of his guys that he used to work with at like Oracle and Salesforce and SAP. But these guys, all they're interested in is hunting big elephant. And that's not what this is about. This is, we need to go and catch a deer, and then we can start catching a few rabbits and maybe a few deer as we go into it, right? So thanks for sharing that, Barb. That was cool. So yeah, Barb's a girl. Barb's a girl. She's got nerves of steel. Let's put it that way. And why is that, Barb? Because you know it makes sense, right? You know it makes sense. Indeed.
I would love to kind of get an idea as to how you guys, or where you've been, who owns sales, right? According to Allison, that the company owns sales, you know. But so I was curious as to what you guys, your organization that you either are in or were in, who owns sales. Did you feel that the ideal way is that right, nobody owns sales, like everybody owns it.
That's it, yeah.
So any thoughts as to how your organization is currently handling that particular question, or particular, you know, what stance you guys take currently?
Will, do you want to have a go at that? You've been talking so much.
Definitely. So in terms of ultimately getting down to brass tacks, I think who owns sales comes down to comp plan, which is kind of a cheesy way or a slick way to get out from underneath, owning the larger picture. But comp plan kind of, sets a dividing line in the sand as to where sales is going to fall and customer success. Once that's kind of determined from a customer success manager perspective, irrespective of comp plan, identifying opportunities, working with your customer to provide an understanding of the benefits they may get as you're in a project, and then definitely handing it over to an AE to come in and take, depending on how comp plan is organized. If the AE has to take down the opportunity, then kind of setting them up for success and providing kind of a mutual ground by which your customer and AE can kind of work together to get that outcome is kind of the approach that I like to take. Ultimately, like in terms of working with sales, I like to maintain like a pretty strong relationship there, because then it enables me to understand, new opportunities, what's the use case, what are the customer's expectations, how do we meet those expectations? And then post sales, where are the quick wins? What's the larger, if it's not a quick win, what's the larger initiative? And then how do we, think of a time frame by which we can support the customer getting to that initiative, and then expanding that contract along the way to get them to that outcome and to that like place of success. So that's kind of how I think of it. It's blurry, and then depending upon time frame, I either loop in the AE, and then of course AEs are different according to the super aggressive ones that are slippery, or the ones who understand that there may be challenges. Implementation may not be simple or straightforward, but are okay kind of working and dealing with that, as long as they know that the customer will get to the outcome, ideally on that time frame that's been sold to them.
Yeah, well said. Well, yeah.
Actually, you know what, you guys, I think what I meant to say was who owns the customers. Who owns the customers. So my apologies. So yeah, so according to Allison Pickens, that the ideal thing is all of us, right? It's not just one in a particular department or person.
Yeah.
Let me correct that.
Agreed. I mean, everybody in the company gets paid based on customer retention.
Yeah, CSAT.
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, customer retention. But also, Cindy, I think it's, I'll tell you who owns a customer. It's the culture that owns the customer, and you're all going to think about it and say, yeah, because I think what you'll probably experience is when the sales guy walks away, there's that void that Renee deals with that we all have to go in and pick up the pieces. And also, as Will said, it's also a compensation issue. So it's all of these things, but who owns the customer? Ultimately, it's the CEO, and everybody below him owns that customer. That's what I think. Everybody owns the customer, right? But if you don't compensate people accordingly, it drives, behavior. So that's kind of the joint answer to that, I think. Anyone? We got 6 minutes left according to my timer here, by the way. Does that help?
The only thing I'll throw down is like, that's all good, but the actual customer interaction model, like who actually drives a specific customer, like I totally agree, culture, CEO, like all of that. But like the day-to-day, you have an AE trying to upsell, you have a renewals person trying to renew, and you have a CSM, like that interaction model, if you don't have clear rules of engagements and playbooks, I don't know if you've ever heard of the ping model, like, or is it a protect and invest and nurture or grow account? And if you kind of look at a ping model and kind of say, well, where is this customer in our life cycle? And then you can kind of say, okay, given that this is a grow account, the AE is going to run and own this. And it could flip right after the AE is done to like a nurturer, and then it's CSMs. But if you can think about customer segmentation slightly differently than just like book of business, size of ARR, all those things, but also like what's their maturity, what's their potential, and who owns driving that based on that. Because otherwise I find it gets really messy if everybody's trying to, like from a tactical, that little team perspective, if nobody knows who's driving, either nobody's driving or everybody's wrestling, or everybody's wrestling for the steering wheel. So you're kind of like all over the road, right? And it's just like, and so it's really hard to team if you don't have a good playbook based on what the potential of the customer is.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I was going to say along the same lines, you know, that continuum that you were showing at the beginning, Adam, with the land, adopt, expand, and renew, you know, depending on which piece of the continuum the client is in, you know, it definitely fluctuates between sales, you know, CSM, support, even, you know, back to sales, or maybe a joint effort between those groups, depending on which one they're in.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that one, Renee. Ping, I haven't heard that. That's a good one. I like that one. Protect, invest, nurture, grow. So you have to protect, you have to invest to protect. And do you nurture the customer or do you grow the customer? Is that it?
Yeah, I'll actually see if I can throw it into the link really quickly.
It's probably in the book part I didn't read.
Oh no, it's not in this book. It's in somewhere else, because
I'll look it up. It'll be on the interweb somewhere. It'll be in the web. But that's right. But Cindy V as well. That was interesting. That just went off in my head what you just described. You know, this cycle here, and as Renee and we all agree, it's who's ultimately responsible. It should be certain people along the way. And what I've seen, it's very hard to demarcate between, especially this adopt and expand, because expand, the sales guy said, well, that's my deal, right? Or renew. How many, I've seen a lot of guys leave big companies because now they're being compensated on a renewal at the end of the term as well. And they don't like that. They just want to walk away from it. So going back to Cindy at the top of my screen here, who's in San Francisco, not really, I don't think, but oh, you are good.
Silicon Valley, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So back to you know, who owns it? It's everybody, but clearly defined responsibilities, I think is the answer, isn't it? And everyone agree or disagree? Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Will says, you know, compensation drives behavior. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. But understanding. So I was at Salesforce for quite a while, and they had an organization there called CFL, Customers for Life. Best name for CSM group I've ever heard of, right? But they were pretty clear. Once the sales guy landed, they went in and they did the adopt, the expand, and the renewal was a joint effort between the CFL rep and the account executive as well. So that drove behavior as well. And obviously you can look at their success. They're doing something right, aren't they? They really, yeah, they are doing something right. So I've got 2 minutes left before we get cut off. What else did I want to make a point of? Talked about that. This is a picture I took at SaaStr last year or a couple of years ago, and it's this: easier to accelerate growth when you're retaining your customers rather than trying to battle to fight to keep them, if you know what I mean. So the more you invest in your customers, once you beat them, once you've won, it's much easier to keep them rather than dealing with churn at the end. My company where I am now, we lost 4 customers this year. Okay. 4 of our 27 we lost. And you know why we lost them? Didn't show them the love. We literally showed up at, you know, a month before renewal and stuck a proposal under their nose. And they're like, what?
And said, come on, sign on the dotted line. And
yeah, press hard for copies.
Terrible way to.
Yeah. And this was, and we had a big account, an automotive. It was like our lighthouse account. And they just said, nope, not going to do that. You've shown us no love. You haven't fixed the product, etc.
We all know we love buying good customer service. I mean, at least I do. I know that I'll pay for customer service before I'll pay for a product any day.
Yep. Any day, yeah. So this was something I took, that was last year at SaaStr. Give customers a reason not to churn, right? Make them feel happy, product value. And the other thing is underline, make it difficult, how to make them sticky. There's various ways, right? But making it, I know it's a little bit untoward, but making it a little bit difficult to switch out. And that comes back to me is product value. If you're defining value with the product and the service you're providing, they won't even think about going elsewhere. They should, you know, renew. What was that? That was that. Yeah, so I just came back to this. You know, when you're hiring for success, hire people that are innovative and curious. I've learned that painfully in the last couple of years as well. Curiosity. People that are curious and really want to, and again, how to interview for that. I've learned a few tricks. Ask them what they do in their spare time. And people that are artists, or they're creative, stuff like that. That inspires curiosity today, right? And as we just said, Will said it, right? Align sales comp with all the leading indicators, right? So that, and that's a, I mean, that's a hard one. Attainable goals, data-driven plans. We're finished. This room's going to close in 51 seconds. Anything else? Has this been good? Mediocre? Fun?
Good stuff.
Yeah, I learned 2 things from this. So I'm going to take away from this: marriage therapy and ping. Yeah, those
Quick
are my
question, Adam. How do you identify innovators within the sales process?
So again, innovators, people that are
within the hiring process.
Yeah, problem solvers rather than, you know, people that are, you know, I ask, so, you know, classic, give me an example of you had this problem, how did you solve it? I listen to what they say, you know, well, oh, that was pretty innovative. It was a bit different, you know, maybe it's just bringing people together, but, you know, curiosity and innovation go together, Cindy, curiosity and innovation. We're out of here.
And we're back.
We're back. Everyone else should be in here in about 5 seconds.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, so how were the conversations?
Well, I'm going to tell you I was fantastic, right? Let's start there.
You always are.
I know, I can't help it. It's
you know,
a gift and a curse, a gift and a curse.
Exactly, exactly. Did you guys come away with anything kind of cool and, you know, usable?
This is Cynthia. This is my first time joining, and I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest. And so I really appreciated my session. We were talking about the relationship between product and CS, and I think people shared some good challenges, some good solutions, and just like good like perspective from our different works. So that was great.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Well, so the way that we format this is I'm going to run through some housekeeping. And while I do that, if you guys can help me, I put together a takeaway deck that I emailed to everybody about a week later. We also have it on, Lauren posted on their Gain site blog page. So if you can write in the chat something tactically that you felt really resonated for you that maybe you can use going forward, that would be awesome. So if you guys can start putting that in the chat, I'm going to ask the moderators to kind of share, you know, 1 or 2 great takeaways that they felt was really great for the group. So Laura, with, you know, starting from the very beginning with us, you've done lots of these. So how about you kick us off?
Sure, absolutely. We had a great chat, and Cynthia, thank you for joining this time. We talked about connecting CS and the product team, and had some really great recommendations across the board. One of the things that I really loved, Alan brought up this idea. A question came up for in the group, which is, when you have requests for product features, how do you determine how to prioritize which features to actually roll out? And Alan noted that they actually will start with a grid where they say, okay, here's MRR, and then also here is customer health, to really help prioritize which clients to think about, okay, who do we prioritize those asks from? But also beyond that, mention, I think actually Cynthia maybe mentioned taking that those requests, or maybe it was Fred, sorry, and turning it into a use case that they can take to other clients, and then identify, I think that was, Fred, you said this, seeing whether or not these new features actually will be beneficial for key clients who exist, within your suite. So a couple of really great ideas, and a lot of others too, but we'll share those in the deck.
Great, thanks. All right, and then Josh, how about you? What was, 1 or 2 great tactics that you heard from your group?
Yeah, there was one in particular. So the book actually had this this formula that they kept calling out, right? It's CS equals CO plus CS, customer success plus CO equals CO plus CX. So I'm totally boffing it up now. But basically, the whole idea that customer outcomes are great and customer success can happen, but not without having a good customer experience along the way. So everything from marketing, the way that the collaboration happens between marketing and customer success needs to be intentional, needs to be prescriptive and proactive in a lot of ways. And the more of that stuff that happens, the better of a continuity can exist for the customer's experience. And then the other part to that is kind of shifting gears from the inside out approach that we tend to look at customer experience and really thinking about it from the outside in. What is the customer actually thinking when they are engaging with us? And how do we make sure that we're being mindful of what their experience looks like, so that we're not giving them the isolated, siloed hug of death just because we love them. We are actually doing things that are truly actionable and predictive for them, prescriptive for them.
That's awesome. Yeah, really great takeaways. And Adam?
Yeah, I like that one. I just wrote that one down. I'm going to steal that and put that into my repertoire. Thank you very much. I like that very much. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. So we had a really good discussion, and I took it down the route of it's how do you hire the right people? Of course, that really is. But the continuum, and we had the perfect question at the end from Cindy G. is like, who owns the customer? Brilliant question, right? What was the answer?
That was the chapter we were dealing with. It's a difficult question.
Yeah, and so we had a discussion on that. Will had a good point. It's about compensation. Yeah, it's also about the demarcation between land, adopt, expand, renew. Okay, so that was a very good discussion. But we got a doozy from Renee. This was a good one. Ping. Ready for this? Ping. P-I-N-G. Protect, to invest, to nurture and grow.
Oh, I love that. I love that. All right, cool. And then we have 2 minutes left. So very quickly, I want to share something that I think will be of value to a lot of you. But real quickly, for my breakout group, we had a really good conversation about this, who owns the customer, right? The CEO needs to own the customer. If it's not coming from the top down, it's a lot more difficult. So we really talked about how do we, when we're CSMs trying to do inroads with the people on the different teams, product, support, CS, how do we actually work with them individually to try and make something work? I know Eshwar's team, they have stoplight reports. It comes from the top down. The CEO is bought in because the board is bought in. And so if we get the boards are always all about customer success. So that is a way to ensure that it comes from the top down, is getting the board involved, because they all know how important customer success is. Lots more, but I'll put them in the takeaway deck. So with that last minute, I want to share with you guys job opportunities, because I know many of us out there are looking for them, right? We're all in between jobs, or trying to find our next great adventure. So I actually get hit up for, I'm gonna hide this. I actually get hit up by recruiters, quite frequently for job postings. These are just a few of them. If you guys have positions that you're trying to fill, we have a lot of great people in this group. So please email me or message me if you guys have a job posting. Either just send me the link, or if you want me to kind of vet them. I know a lot of these people that are on these calls, send it to me. I can make it private. I can make it private or public, whichever you prefer. But there are some here. So if you guys anyone's looking for a job, I'm happy to pass you to certain people. And then if your experience aligns well, I'll recommend you. But I really want to make sure that we help each other out during these, uncertain times. Okay, and then lastly, I do want to talk about the, let's see, can I get it to go? Next events. So Pulse Local San Diego, Josh actually moderates those. And next Tuesday, December 15th, it's going to be selling and realizing value in a time of COVID. So if you want to be able to register for that, we have the link here. And again, I send you this deck later, so you'll have that. And then next month, as I had mentioned before, we get into the middle of part 2 of the book, services and support, how to bake it into those groups, and that is always on the third Thursday at 12 p.m. So really hope to see you at the next one. I think we're like 2 minutes over. So thank you guys for staying on. I hope it was of value, and you'll be getting the deck here soon. Take care, everybody.
America.
Thank you.
Bye.